Ladies and gentlemen, get in here for a Sunday morning murder church, episode 56 of the Phil Spector murder trial. I know, still trucking, still going down through this Phil Spector trial, and it's going to be quite a while. Thanks everyone for being here, appreciate it. Hit the old like, share this out on the old X machine, just now did. I saw a bunch of people doing that previously. I know Dizzy did, Seeking Justice, Pokemon, thanks everyone, it really helps us out. Let's get in here.
Let's rock.
Good morning, everyone. The fine folks of planet Earth. Welcome in. Publicly Buzzed live on the air. I appreciate everyone for coming through here. I'm going to start out real quick with some bells. First of all, I need to make sure they're working. I think they should be. I don't think anything's changed since Friday. Just got to find them. Bring them bells in. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. We had a killer Friday night show with Bob. Oh my God. Anybody that missed the Bob show Friday, you need to go check it out. It's getting rave reviews. Anybody that didn't see the ending of that show, you're really missing out if you're a creator. A lot of tips in there that could maybe help you out. I saw people talking about that as well. A lot of fun folks coming through here. Let's see what we got. First of all, let me fix this up. Let me get the chat over here so we can talk to each other. At least the way I like to do it. Boom! Sheila definitely coming in here from Ireland. I gotta go check the mail, Sheila, to see if that package has arrived yet. I'll do that this week. Pokemon in the house, Shelly. Yeah, Mom is doing pretty good. I had to cancel the show yesterday with Hella from Excited Utterance. We were going to go deep into the Koberger motions hearing that was happening this week. But yeah, sadly, my mom's foot started messing with her. And then hurt her rib. She was complaining real bad, and it's hard for her to get around anyways. Dan ended up calling an ambulance, taking her to the ER. They did x-rays. They did some kind of scan to check her ribs. They didn't find anything, broken, which is thankful. But yeah, she's having trouble. Got her back to the house, got her comfortable. She's got some pain pills. But yeah, it sucks, man. It's no good. So Dan is dealing with that currently. Vixie Blaze coming through here. What's up, Vixie? Get the hell in here. Get the hell in here. Good morning. Pammy coming through, telling everybody what is going on. Love to see it. Jersey Jen, good morning. Hell yeah. Wrestle Plunge, who's that guy? Welcome in here. Appreciate everybody coming through. We're about to jump in here and get her going. Of course, the wheels are wide open. We had a wheel party on Friday with Bob that got out of control, which is I'm so thankful for. Gypsy's so thankful for as well. Thanks everyone. Everyone's the coolest. All that's wide open. I'll be keeping eyes on, of course, the apps. But yeah, let's get in here. I believe I've got the right video pulled up. I need to get this guy's name. This is Officer James Hammond. Hammond is taking the stand next. Alhambra Police Officer James Hammond takes the stand, and we've got an hour starting out here with Mr. Hammond. So I'm going to be popping up Canva. I'm going to get his name over here so we know who we're dealing with. But yeah, let's go ahead and move over.
That's a James Hammond. That's J.
First and last name.
That's a James Hammond. That's James. Last of Hammond.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. Hammond, in February of 2003, how were you employed?
Police officer for the city of Alhambra.
And are you still employed by the police department in Alhambra? In Alhambra?
Yes, I am.
Back in February, particularly February 3rd of 2003, were you a patrol officer?
Yes, I was.
And about 5 in the morning, did you get a call directing you to 1700 Grandview in the city of Alhambra?
Yes, I did.
And were you accompanied by several other officers?
Yes, I was.
When you arrived at the location, did you eventually find yourself in a rear area where there's a fountain and a parking area?
Yes, I did.
And at that point, did you hear a radio call initiated by an officer named Cardella?
Yes, I did.
And Officer Cardella was assigned to watch the rear doorway area of the location. Is that your understanding?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Do you remember what the radio call was that you heard?
Oh yeah, do not
The radio-
forget a couple more things real quick. Hold on, I'm getting that name fixed up here. Get the James in there. And we get the shadows in there. Boom. Real quick also, yeah, today at 3 o'clock, have a killer show coming up. I just want to show the thumbnail of that real quick. I don't even think I've shared that out officially. I sent that to Mo last night. Yeah, I'm going to be able to do the Mo show today at 3. In case unless anything comes up. I want to show that just real quick. This one's going to be interesting, guys. It's going to be fairly intense, I would imagine. Butcher of Tompkins Square Park. All right, this is a cannibal. This is someone that killed someone and then fed someone to some folks. I'm going to have the story. We're going to be watching the interrogation of this guy from 1989. Notorious, infamous killer. And yeah, Mo's coming over at 3 p.m. Eastern time to watch that with me. And it's gonna be interesting. I am gonna reschedule the show with Hella Excited Utterance. Just got to get with her to figure out a good time. Again, she's 14 hours into the future in Australia. But yeah, I'm gonna get with her, figure it out, and yeah, because that Hiller stuff is crazy. I think we disagree pretty firmly on Judge Hippler in general. But one thing that I'm interested with having her on for is her knowledge of like the IgG and some of the scientific stuff that I lack knowledge on, honestly. It doesn't really matter if our opinions differ. I kind of want a little bit more of that knowledge and that info so I can add it to my repertoire, quite honestly. But she's awesome. She's really good.
Video transmission was that he saw somebody or observed somebody around the residence or inside the residence.
And after hearing that call, did you and
Hey, all folks just coming in, give it the old share.
several other officers go and place yourself near where he was standing?
Artist formerly known
Yes,
as
we
Twitter.
did.
And did you look into the location at that point?
Yes, I did.
Incidentally, Officer Cardello was involved in some form of accident in the not too distant past, is that right?
That is correct.
So he's off duty at this time?
Yes, he is.
Now, when you looked into the location, did you see someone inside the location?
Yes, I did.
And did you later determine that the person you saw was Mr. Philip Spector?
Yes, I did.
Where was he when you first saw him?
Mr. Spector was on the landing to the foyer. It's just right above the south door of the residence, and is part of the landing that goes to the upstairs.
Okay. And later you entered the location and saw that entire foyer and stairway area, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. At the time you made this observation, were you looking through a window or a doorway?
Looking through a window.
And when you saw Mr. Spector on the landing, what did you see him do?
He had his back turned towards us, and his arms were crossed like this, and he appeared to be pondering about something that was in front of him.
Did he appear
That
to be
sounds like
looking
Phil.
down toward the first floor
Being
area?
weird as hell.
Yes, he was looking down with his head kind of tilted down.
Okay. And when you said he had his hands like this, for the record, you had basically your hands crossed in front, arms crossed in front of you with your hands in your bicep area?
That would be correct.
Okay. Now, after you saw him there, did you again see him within a matter of seconds later?
It was a short time later, I'd say probably within 20, 30 seconds, he appeared out the door.
Okay. And at that point, had you and the other group of officers moved closer to the doorway where you saw him standing?
After giving him commands, yes, we did.
What did you or the other officers tell him?
All folks still coming in the door. Love to see it. Thank you all. Hell yeah. Nice. Umby dips hand in holy water, turns genuflex, accidentally farts, and sits in his pew next to Pammy. I'm sure I butchered that one. What the fuck is genuflex? Lowers one's body. Whoa, we got a smart dude in here. Lowers one's body briefly by bending one knee to the ground, typically in worship. Whoa, holy shit, that's awesome. Love
him to do at that point?
I've never seen that word in my life.
Officer Cardella, from what I recall, was telling him to remove his hands from his pocket and to walk towards us so we could get him in a position so we can contain him.
Okay. Now,
Music in the background. Oh, son of a bitch. Oh, I've got to fix that. My bad. Sorry about that. Damn. I'd have a new song set up, but yeah, I've got to make sure it's only in the scene and not in. Sorry about that, guys. Fuck. That's it. Do I need to restart this? I think we're still pretty early here. So.
where was he located when Officer Cardello made that statement to him?
Mr. Spector was still standing on the stairs that lead up to the south doorway to the back entrance.
Okay. In relation to that rear doorway, was he inside or outside of the doorway?
He was outside the doorway.
Okay. And there's a small entryway there, like a little porch. Was he on that?
Well, you know what? Oh, my God.
Yes, he was.
Okay. Were you able to see his expression from where you were located at that point?
Expression, exactly. Vague expression.
I think if he, do you understand the question?
I do.
All right, the objection's overruled. You may answer.
His stare, he knew where we were at, but his stare was like a blank stare. And he wasn't too concerned with us, it appeared.
Okay. In your report, you referred to his expression as being a dazed or confused look. Is that what you concluded based on looking at
Confused for so long. It's not true.
the gentleman's face that evening?
Yeah, just non-emotional, blank stare, wouldn't look at us, and looking around us and not listening to anything we were saying.
Okay. Did he appear confused to you?
Objection, not called.
Sustained.
Well, I'm not asking if he was. I'm asking about the appearance, Your Honor.
I'm not sure that someone knows what a
No,
confused
it's copyright-free music. I made that song.
appearance is. You can ask other questions, around it, but I'm going to sustain the objection.
We were pretty early.
He was standing with a blank stare. He had his hands in his pockets. Is that correct?
That is correct.
His pants pocket like I have now?
Yes.
And just kind of looking off into the distance, not making eye contact with you or the other officers. Is that what it was?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, after Officer Cartello told him to take his hands out of his pockets, did he do that at some point?
He did.
And did he raise them up above his head area like I'm doing?
Yes, he did.
And did he keep them there?
No, he did not.
What did he do with them?
It was very quick. He brought his hands up very quickly. We observed nothing in his hands, and he put them back in his pockets.
Okay. And did he still have this kind of blank expression or blank look on his face?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Now, at some point, at this point in the event, did you and the other officers move closer toward him?
Yes, we did.
And Officer Cardella, he was the lead officer, is that right?
That's correct.
And he had a piece of equipment known as a ballistic shield, is that right?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And Officer or Corporal Pate was behind him, is that right?
Yes, Detective P was behind us.
And behind him was you, I guess.
Yeah,
That's correct.
And then Officer Rodriguez and
Pumpkin's been working on
Tamayo
that
made
one
up
for
the
so long.
balance of that group, is that right?
Yes, by that time, Officer Tamayo was already stationed to the...
Freaking sweet.
I believe it's going to be kind of the
Will
northeast
win.
corner of the residence.
We'll win.
Now,
Up.
as
Pumpkin.
Mr. Spector
Pumpkin.
stood there on that
Pumpkin.
rear porch,
Checking my sound.
this kind of blank look, did
Pumpkin and
Detective
Pansy.
P do something with a piece of equipment at some point in time?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And what did he do?
Detective informed us that he was going to go ahead and...
Let me indicate something, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you
9
what
on the
we're
new
doing.
wheel,
next
so 3
witness
away
who's
from
gonna
another
testify,
spin.
who we're going to refer to as Detective P, is working in an undercover capacity. At the request of his department and for his safety, we're not referring to him by his name. We will not mention his name, and we've asked the press not to mention his name. He's not going to be photographed because it's for safety, because he's out on the streets working in that capacity. So that's why we're using this terminology to that individual. So it's Detective P. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Yo, they call me Detective P
And,
when I come through.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Did you answer what Detective P did at that point?
And Detective P advised us that he was going to go ahead and tase him.
Okay, and did he do that?
Make them
yes,
say,
he did.
Detective P. Make them say, Detective P.
And what happened when he shot the taser at Mr. Spector?
As the taser probes exited the taser, the right probe went a little bit
As the probe exited the taser, Phil Spector made a squeal like a pig. I can't even do one. I'm going to try to get
high,
I
hit
need
Mr.
to hear a
Spector in the
pig
chest
squeal.
area.
Hold on.
It'd actually be his left area. And the bottom taser, which was more towards Mr. Spector's right, actually dropped off and didn't penetrate.
Are you trained in the use of the taser?
Yes, I am.
And do both probes have to?
Quack, 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 quack.
To make contact with an individual in
do
order
it.
for the current to pass out of the gun into the individual?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so if there's only one lead
Greenie with
attached
the
to Mr.
share.
Spector,
Thank you, Greenie.
the gun wouldn't have its intended effect. Is that right?
It's unlikely that it would work.
Now, at some point,
Oh, Sheila Duffy.
did Mr.
That makes us
Spector
10,
turn
Sheila.
back
Thank
into
you.
the house and walk into the house?
He did that prior to us tasing him.
Okay. Before he turned back into the house, did he make a statement in the direction of the officers?
Hell yeah.
Can you rephrase that?
The fuck's up
Did at
factual?
some
I
point,
get the hell in
Mr.
here.
Spector say, "You've got to come in and see this," words to that effect?
Objection, here.
Would you read that back? I didn't hear the question.
Question, did at some point Mr. Spector say you've got to come in and see this to that effect?
Approach the bench, please.
Officer Hammond, do you have the question in mind?
Repeat the question, please.
At some point when Mr. Spector was standing on a porchway or a little entryway, before he turned to go back into the house, did he make a statement, "You've got to come in and see this"?
Yes, he did.
And thereafter, he walked back into the foyer area?
He stepped that direction, yes.
Okay, and then shortly afterwards was when Detective P shot the taser at him?
Detective P. Nah, nah.
Were the officers still attempting to get Mr. Spector to exit the house, show his hands at that point in time?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And Mr. Spector was just standing in the foyer, not responding, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so at some point, was a command or a direction given to enter the location to try to take Mr. Spector into custody?
Yes, it was.
And did Officer Cardello with the shield
Machine
enter
gun,
first?
hearts and thumbs.
Yes, he did.
Okay. Ms. Behringer, do we have that exhibit available? It's AA, I believe. This is not a real clear picture, but in the area, oops. Can you see a dark object on the floor near the chair that's closest to the doorway there?
I can't make it out.
Describe the shield, if you would.
The ballistic shield is an item that's probably about 2 feet wide, probably about 4 feet high. It's got a handle on it. It's designed to keep rounds from coming into the person that's carrying it, and it's got a little glass windshield that's there.
So it's basically a bulletproof shield if it does what it's supposed to do, is that right?
That's correct.
I gotta get some coffee.
What did office...
I'm gonna do that.
And what was Mr.
All right, guys, I'm gonna
Spector
get some
doing as the
coffee.
officers entered the
Watching on the
location?
phone.
Mr.
hold it
Spector at
down.
that time, after the taser didn't work, was standing there. At that point, we started to move forward and pushed him to the ground.
And,
The taser didn't work? Wow, Phil. That's how drunk Phil Spector was. I guarantee it, first of all. That's crazy. Because Phil's a small dude, man. I hope people have seen, taser videos when people are just fucking, usually the drunker you are, the better you can handle it. But it's crazy when they just like stiff completely up and go backwards. Like, I guess it just hits some folks different. Tasers are dangerous, man.
Cardella
I'll be
used
right
the shield to push him.
Yes, he did.
And did he push him into the stairway area that appears to be on the right side of
guess there's
the
different
Exhibit
voltages.
AA there?
That is correct.
Okay, and did Mr. Spector
Just a
go
little
backwards
dandelion.
to an area where there was a pedestal at that time, do you recall?
Yes, there was right there at the.
Wish I could. Hold on. Before I go. Hold on. Wish I could bring him. Hold on. I'm going to try to. I wish I could. I'd have to add an effect, but it would be possible. I just have to get the timing right. Hold on. Let me find Phil Spector. Get him over here. Hold on. He's got to get in front of me. Just give you guys a little. Everybody, make a wish. This fucking guy's hand.
Foot of the stairs.
Okay, and he eventually was not to the. Well, actually, did Detective P then pass Cardello and come into contact
buddy.
with Mr.
Let me get some
Yes, he
coffee,
did.
guys. We're
And,
right back.
did Detective P is a big fellow, is he not?
He's 6 foot, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. And did he throw Mr. Spector down to the ground?
From my vantage point, the shield appeared to be what kind of knocked Mr. Spector back onto the ground. I was third behind the line.
Okay. In any event, within those few moments, Mr. Spector wound up on the floor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And when he was on the floor, did you take a part of his body at any time? Did you grab hold of any part of his body?
Yes, I did.
And what did you grab hold of?
I grabbed a hold of his right arm, which was extended.
Okay, was he laying prone, that is, on his face on the floor?
Yes, he was.
And his right arm was extended above his head, was it?
Yes, it was.
And you took a hold of his arm to immobilize it, I take it?
And to get him prepared for cuffing.
Okay. And where was Detective P at that point?
Detective P was, I believe, closer to the banister, almost in between Mr. Spector and the banister, trying to gain control of the left arm.
And Mr. Spector's left arm was beneath his body, was it?
That is correct.
And Detective P pulled it out from beneath his body around to the rear of his body for a handcuffing position, is that right?
Yes.
And did Detective P, he had his knee on Mr. Spector's back to keep him immobilized, did he?
Yes, he did.
And the other two officers, Cardella, other three, I guess, Tamayo and Rodriguez, were they all in that same confined foyer area at that point?
Officer Tamayo, like I said, was at the northeast corner of the residence, taking point on the front door. So he was outside the residence. Officer Rodriguez, she was within that area. She was behind me.
Okay, so,
And Officer Cardella, he ended up behind me.
was this, I guess everybody kind of, or all of the officers, the four officers now entered in kind of a rush, is that right?
It was a controlled rush, yes.
Okay. And your attention was focused on placing handcuffs on Mr. Spector, is that right?
My attention, based on me being third in line, was to protect the two that were actually in the physical altercation with Mr. Spector at the very beginning.
Okay.
And that was to cover stairwells, opening doors, whatever it might have been. Quickly, that changed to where I had to get involved with the handcuffing.
You mentioned altercation. That kind of implies that Mr. Spector was trying to fight back. That didn't happen, did it?
That's not my intention, no. I'm just saying that as we're trying to take him into custody to contain him, that's when I started changing my role of being on point to trying to cuff Mr. Spector.
Okay. In terms of Mr. Spector offering any resistance, he was basically standing there, wasn't complying with your verbal commands, but he wasn't physically resisting, was he?
No, he was not.
Okay. Then he got knocked over by the shield, and officers jumped on him and handcuffed him. Is that right?
We handcuffed him, yes.
Once he was handcuffed, was he somewhere in that foyer area?
Yes, he was around the banister area.
Okay, kind of where the dates, or that little numeric figure is there on the bottom right?
Right in that general area, yes.
Okay. And was he left in that position until he was taken away from the location?
Yes, he was.
Now, after the handcuffs had been placed upon Mr. Spector, did you eventually turn your attention to the woman that was seated in the chair there?
Yes, I'd already noticed her when I first went in. Then I turned my attention to her because at that point somebody had to check her vitals to see what was going on.
And did you see who did that?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
That was Officer Cardella.
Okay. I take it he approached her as she was seated somewhat in a similar position that you see her there.
That is correct.
And did he raise her left arm and appear to feel for a pulse on her left wrist?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct.
You recall that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did he stop to put gloves on before he did that, if you recall?
I don't recall him putting gloves on.
And after he appeared to search for a pulse on Ms. Clarkson's left wrist, did he place her hand back down on the chair or on her body, leave her there?
From what I recall, he didn't actually move the arm or anything. He just went down and checked the pulse and advised that there was no pulse.
Okay. Now, when Mr. Spector was on the floor there, did you, before I ask this question, perhaps Mr. Dixon and I ought to approach. Officer Hammond, while Mr. Spector was on the floor there after he'd been handcuffed, did you hear him ask someone to get his white jacket, that he wanted his white jacket?
I don't recall that statement.
Okay. Did you hear him ask for a list of phone numbers or a list of numbers?
I don't recall that statement.
Before Mr. Spector was knocked over by the shield, did you know whether or not Detective P attempted to use the taser in a contact against Mr. Spector by placing it against his body somewhere?
That is correct.
And the taser makes a noise when it goes off, kind of an electrical noise, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Did you observe that noise when Detective P attempted to directly use the taser on Mr. Spector?
I heard it once.
Was it at that point you heard it? When you say you heard it once, was it at the point where Detective P had it against Mr. Spector's body?
I recall it outside when the prongs go out, it makes the noise. When we're inside, I saw Detective P going for the body contact, and I don't recall ever hearing it.
Okay, so you're not able, are you able to tell whether or not it worked when it was in contact, whether it discharged any electricity when it was physically in contact with Mr. Spector?
I couldn't testify to that.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning.
I have a few questions for you, too. Just let me get over there. Defense counsel asked you if at some point you asked the defendant, Phil Spector, to show his hand. You remember that?
I personally didn't, but it was asked.
It was asked by one of your fellow officers in your presence, correct?
That is correct.
How many officers were there?
There was a total of 5 of us that were on the property at that time.
What time was this?
It'd be roughly just right after 5 o'clock in the morning.
And that's when you first arrived, is that right?
That is-
Just after 5 o'clock.
That is correct.
But it was sometime much later before he was arrested and handcuffed. Isn't that correct? Some 40 minutes or so?
That would be correct.
Now, going back to, you asked him, or one of your fellow officers asked him to show his hands, right?
Yes,
And that's because his hands would have been in his pocket.
that is correct.
And the reason that Alhambra officers yelled at him, and it was yelled, correct? This wasn't just, hey, take your hands out of your pocket. It was yelled. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Did you have some kind of bullhorn, or was it just flat out yell?
It was talk as loud as you can.
And the reason you did that was why?
I'm going to object. He didn't do it, so it'd be hard for him to know why the others did
I
it.
think there's protocol somewhere.
Can you rephrase or re-ask, please?
The reason that your fellow officer yelled at Phil Spector to take his hands out of his pocket is for officer safety, because everybody there thought that there was a gun involved in this incident. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And the defendant took his hands out of his pockets and then put them back in, right?
Yes, he did.
And you know that handguns can be secreted in your pocket, correct?
Yes.
What does officer safety mean? What does that mean?
Officer safety to us means that we get to go home at the end of the day if we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing.
That's right. And that's an important, obviously, utmost importance in your line of work, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, you want to make sure that every one of your fellow officers gets to do their job in an incident like this. No one gets hurt, and you all get to go home to your families every night, correct?
That is correct.
And you also want to make sure that no one else gets hurt, other civilians, even suspects. You don't want anyone to get hurt. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And in your police department, the Alhambra Police Department, that's a very important, perhaps most important policy in the office. Isn't that correct? Is officer safety, make sure no one gets hurt or killed.
Yes, it is.
And that is always of primary importance when you get a call that weapons are involved or shots went off. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
So in this instance, when you arrived at 1700 Grandview that morning, February 3rd, a little after 5 in the morning, you heard and your fellow officers knew that shots had been fired, correct?
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm going to object. First of all, that's beyond the scope. Second of all, there's no report of shots being fired.
To a certain extent, the way the question was phrased, I'll sustain it, but the rest of it is relevant, so just rephrase.
Do you understand that that a weapon had been used? Was that your belief that a weapon had been used?
I'm going to object. That's not relevant.
It is relevant to explain their actions, which have been raised and can be argued in more than one fashion.
Yes, we were aware that there was a gunshot possible victim in the residence.
Right. And at some point before you arrested Phil Spector that day, did you talk to an Adriana D'Souza, or one of your fellow officers talk to him and relate that information to you?
Yes, he did.
The limo driver.
Yes, he did.
And the information that you had at the time that you arrested Phil Spector was that the limo driver said
Excuse me,
that...
I'm going to object. This is hearsay, and it's also beyond the scope.
It's not. Again, first of all, it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. It's offered to explain why these officers reacted in a certain fashion. Therefore, it's not beyond the scope, because as I've indicated, that can be argued in a multitude of fashions, quite frankly. So for all those reasons, the objections are overruled. You may proceed.
And you'd learned that Adriana D'Souza, the limo driver, had said that the suspect in the house had said, I think I just killed somebody or shot somebody, correct?
That is correct.
And so isn't it true that all the officers that you were working with there had that information, that a gun had been used, that there was a victim in the house, and that a suspect in the house may have fired a weapon? Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
So fair to say that that's a pretty serious situation for you and for your fellow officers, right?
Yes, it is.
One that involves a very real concern for officer safety and the safety of others. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And does your department, Alhambra Police Department, have certain policies in place that you were trained on to make sure that officers are protected in trying to arrest a suspect in that kind of a situation?
Yes, they do.
And those are policies that are also dictate certain tactics that are taken in various times that you are required to follow. Is that right?
That is correct.
And again, the primary purpose there is for officer safety and the safety of suspects so that the arrest is done without anyone being hurt, either the suspect or the police officers. Is that right?
That is correct.
So let's talk about this one a little bit. Sudi, can we have People's 21? You arrived there, as you said, a little after 5 o'clock in the morning on February 3rd of 2003, correct?
Yes.
Still dark outside, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And the location they went to is a rather, now we have People's 21 up for identification photographs A and B. Do you recognize these photographs of the house that you went to?
Yes, I do.
Had you ever been by that house? I think it's referred to as some type of castle prior to this.
Yes, I had.
Would you characterize it as a rather large house surrounded by lots of bushes and trees and shrubbery?
That's a correct estimate or evaluation of it, yes.
And in the dark, can't see everything, correct?
That is correct.
So in the light of what you were trying to do there, going to this location to try to determine what happened with the shots fired call and perhaps make an arrest, were you concerned about officer safety and how you approached this house?
Yes, we were.
And what did you do to try to accomplish that?
Put a tactical plan together, which was tactically in our favor, more than the person that we're going to encounter, and approach this situation and changes that we need to do that's necessary.
You were all in uniform, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And for example, when you approached the house, was your client looking?
Dude, imagine if we did do OJ. I don't even know if that's possible. That one was insane. Wasn't that one like actually a year or more plus? Like, this is 6 months.
No, I need to approach the bench momentarily. This is unrelated to witnesses on stand. You may continue.
So OJ's 9 months?
Before our short break there, I think was asking you about this arrest and when you went to 1700 Grandview.
People always say it's
As
interesting.
We can see here in People's
I was a kid and I remember.
Large property.
Well,
Yes, it is.
When you arrived, there was
We're not gonna go there.
a long driveway even up to
But
this
when I was a
back
kid, I
entrance
remember everyone
with the
was into it.
fountain, correct?
Yes.
And there's a garage there, right?
Yes.
And as we said, you thought shots were fired, there was a victim inside. Let me ask you about this. Would you just assume in this situation, with respect to officer safety, that there was only one suspect, or might there be others, or would you know?
Your Honor, I don't know. This is it's not relevant. It's far beyond any inquiry we made of the witness.
For the reasons I've stated, the objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
We have no idea what faces this. You know, we get limited information that goes through our dispatch, that goes to us, and half the time, when we're at a location, it's not what actually was said.
Maybe started this whole
So we have to take everything
phenomenon
into
that
account and make
we're
sure
in
that
now.
there are nobody else out there that's outstanding, any other victims, suspects, whatever it might be.
So you assume that there might be other people there, other suspects there, that they might even
Aaron,
be
thanks for that
armed
share.
because the shots were fired, correct?
Absolutely.
And so when you arrived at the property, you and your other fellow officers, you sweep the area, including the garage area and the other parts of the property, before you even approach the house to determine whether or not there may be other armed people in the area, correct?
Yes.
And that's exactly what you did in this situation.
Yes, it is.
You took it very seriously, correct?
Yes, we did.
At some point, do you know whether or not a K-9 unit was called for?
We attempted to get a K-9 unit as we were making our approach up the driveway, and there was none that were available because of the hours.
Why was a K-9 unit asked for?
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
Again, this the reason, and ladies and gentlemen, the objection is overruled. During direct examination, the witness was asked questions explaining why certain actions were taken. This is an explanation on cross as to why certain things were done in the way they were done. With that in mind, you may proceed.
Did you finish your answer?
No, I didn't. We're trying to get as many resources as we can. K9 is definitely one of them. If we need a beanbag shotgun, that's something that we're looking for, an airship that we're looking for. Whatever makes it a little bit safer for us and the people in the community is what we try to do.
That would be a reason to use the ballistic shields for your own safety, correct?
That is correct.
And as we heard later, or earlier in the direct examination, Detective P at some point used a taser. That's a less than lethal weapon, correct?
Shelley, thank
And
you for
that's
that
something
share.
else that you-
Shelley put it straight up out there. I just now saw that in the feed. Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to share that one too. Boom. Appreciate that.
use along with the, I think you mentioned a shotgun, beanbag shotgun.
That is correct.
Those are all resources
Greeny?
or assets
I
that
think
your
I hollered
police
that one out.
department would
Thank you.
use in this shots
Love it,
fired,
guys.
victim
Saw
at
Jay
the
was
scene
walking this morning.
situation where you don't know how many suspects are there.
Hey, I told Jay to get on the DDPY. I've been on that for this whole year, like 4 weeks now. And I started at the lowest. And then Chris, did you guys see Chris's post yesterday talking about all the injuries he has? He does that. And he was also recommending it. And I've done it in the past, but I always start at like a higher level because I feel like I'm not that broken. But clearly, it's not. You always hurt myself. But if I start at the bed level this time, and I'm just now about to advance out of it into the chair, and then you keep advancing until you can get to where you can actually do it. I feel like it's opening up and breaking scar tissue. Like it's been pretty awesome. I've been keeping stretching, and
How many people
stretching's
have
so
weapons,
important.
and you're trying to protect yourself and other people, correct?
Correct.
So there's no K9 unit available, but if there'd been a K9 there, you would have used the dog to search the area, correct?
Possibility, yes.
All right, so at some point, you clear the driveway, you get up to the garage, make sure that there's no suspects in the garage area, correct?
Correct.
Now, there were at least one or two other cars there, right?
I believe there was 2 cars that I'm aware of that were in the driveway.
All right, and with 2 cars there, that may or may not have made you think that there was more than one suspect, correct?
Correct.
So you check that area out, and then at some point, one of your fellow officers sees a suspect, a person up on the second floor of this very large house that we've seen People's 21, right?
Correct.
And then a few minutes later or moments later, which was it? That person appears at the front door.
It was within 20 to 30 seconds.
And at that point, well, let me ask you, I withdraw that and ask you this. Had you before you saw the defendant at the front door, or really the rear door of this house, had you announced your presence, Alhambra Police Department, please come out?
No, we had not.
So when the defendant appears at the rear door near the fountain, correct?
Correct.
At that point, you announced who you were, correct? Said Alhambra Police Department, is that right?
Yes.
Did you say you're under arrest or put your hands up or what else was said?
Just identifying ourselves as being a police agency that wanted to talk to Mr. Spector, get your hands out of your pockets and walk towards us.
You wanted to find out what happened and you wanted to do it in a safe manner, is that correct?
That is correct.
But the defendant, Phil Spector, didn't comply with your demands, did he?
No, he did not.
He took his hands out of his pockets and he put his hands back in. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Now, so many of us who watch various TV and media and this sort of thing believe that police want to see our hands. Is that correct? You want to see a suspect's hands when you make an arrest?
Absolutely.
Why? Why do you want to do that?
Because the hands are what kills us. If we can control the hands and see the hands, then we know what's going on.
Either with a gun or some other type of weapon, right?
Correct.
Or even when you get in close contact and you're trying to make an arrest of a suspect, you want to see their hands to make sure they don't grab one of your guns. Is that right?
That is correct.
Again, for your safety and the safety of others. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So the defendant comes to the front door, takes his hands out of his pockets and then puts them back in and won't comply with your orders. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Did you issue your orders?
I'll do a DDPY commercial here in a minute after this video.
Yeah,
So let me forget. Because there's some
3,
trippy
4,
videos I want to
5?
show you guys.
I'd say at least 3.
And the defendant did not comply with those orders and in fact turned around and went back into the house. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now from your standpoint, you didn't know whether there were more weapons in that house or not, did you?
We had no idea.
You didn't know whether he was going in to sit down in a chair and wait for you to come in or he was going to go in and get a weapon. You just had no idea.
That is correct.
And so because of that, what did you need to do?
The situation dictated that we need to move because he knew our whereabouts. We didn't know what he was doing, and we wanted to try to keep a visual on him, which we briefly lost for 5-10 seconds. At that point, we made the entry towards the front door so we could observe where he'd gone or where he was.
Oh shit, BG. Check the mail. I think your shirt has arrived. I think it is there.
Again, it's dark
And
outside. You don't know how many people are in there.
Canada.
And I'm not suggesting that the defendant did this in any way, but it's always possible from your perspective at that moment that he could go back in the house, or some suspect could go back in the house and retrieve a weapon, go up on a second or third floor and have a point of advantage on you. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So once the defendant retreated in the house, to prevent that situation, you had to do what?
We had to move to make a tactically advantage for ourselves.
And is that when Detective P first attempted to use the taser?
Yes, it is.
In your experience, have you seen tasers used prior to that or perhaps since then?
Yes, I have.
Do they always work?
No, they do not.
They often don't work, don't they?
I'd say probably about 40% of the time they work, and 60% of the time it seems like they don't.
And when Detective P used the taser the first time on the suspect, from your point of view, you could tell that it didn't work because both the leads, neither of the leads connected, or perhaps one did.
One connected and one fell off.
And as you told defense counsel, they both need to connect before the taser is effective.
That's the ideal situation, yes.
So clearly, at least this first time, it didn't work.
Correct.
Did the defendant show in any way any result or effects of being tasered after Detective P used it the first time?
Showed no signs.
Continued to go into the house?
Yes, he did.
What did you do?
At that point, Detective P said, rush him or something to that effect. Let's go towards him. And then that's when we started moving towards Mr. Spector.
To make the arrest?
To detain him at that point.
And because he hadn't complied with your lawful orders before, correct?
Correct.
We went through the take your hands out of the pocket and all that sort of thing. He hadn't done what you told him to do.
That's correct.
And you'd identified yourself clearly as police officers.
Yes, we did.
I'm
So with your-
also back on the diet. It's not as strict as before, but I'm trying to cut out the bread as much as possible, and the hardest part is the sweets. It's a tough battle, but I'm currently gonna do the fight. I'm here for the fight. You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me, you sugar-looking son of a bitch? You beautiful bastard? Huh? You sexy piece of chocolate?
Ballistic shields. And could you describe those for us?
Yeah, I believe the ballistic shield, like I said, is probably about 2 feet wide. Protects the trunk of our body at least. We try to, and it's probably about 3 feet, maybe 3.5 feet long. And it's made of a ballistic Kevlar type material.
And the plan is, the hope is with those shields is that to protect you, correct?
Correct.
And that if a weapon was fired towards you, then perhaps would block that weapon, that bullet. Is that right?
That is correct.
And by using these shields, you and your fellow officers are able to use less than lethal force against the arrestee in any given situation, correct?
Yes, we could.
It allows you to move towards a person who might have a weapon. You didn't know whether the defendant had a weapon or not at that time. Is that right?
No, we did not.
So it allows you to move forward towards that a person with a weapon or might have a weapon with the shield, where otherwise you might not have to, might not be able to.
That would be correct.
You might have to use deadly force to stop a suspect, but because of the shields, you're able to get closer. Is that right?
It just allows us not to get hurt, hopefully.
Okay. So Detective P said, we're going to go in, we're going to make the arrest, and that's what you did. Is that correct?
Yes.
At some point, as you're participating in that, and I think you said you were the third person in,
That is correct.
and so initially your concern was to watch your two fellow officers
Yes.
that were in front of you.
I definitely did some Tabo, like 100%. Who was the guy? Fucking, was it Wesley Snipes? It wasn't Wesley Snipes, was it? Who was the Tabo guy?
And make sure that they made contact with the suspect and they didn't get hurt themselves. Is that right?
Correct.
But then at some point, you had a different responsibility?
Yes, because Officer Cardella, he had to kind of fall back because he had the shield. At that point,
Billy
I had to
Blanks.
go down and assist Detective P on the handcuffing.
And
Forgot about
are you
Tahoe.
saying anything to the defendant as you're doing this?
I personally wasn't.
Dude, that's not a
too many
bad
people
workout,
saying
though.
things. It's
Like,
not a good thing. So there was
Getting you
Officer
moving.
Cardella mostly made all the commands, and I think when we went down to the ground, Detective P was making the commands at that time.
And what commands were
Dude,
they?
I did too. When I actually was off of it and I got down to almost 200 pounds, I honestly felt better. Like, that shit's terrible. Like, the sugar and the bread, it just makes us move slower and feel worse. But, like, in the moment, and, it's like a brain orgasm or for your mouth while you're eating it. Like, it's so hard to fucking...
Just stop resisting.
evil.
Where the police, get your hands out of your pockets, whatever they might be. Give us your arm. Those type of commands.
And those officers were making those commands which if
like
the
the
defendant
90s,
followed
right?
those commands, it would have made it much easier on everybody.
Absolutely.
Norris,
If
that's
the
right.
defendant immediately complied with your
Frog.
commands,
Get
there would
in
have been very little need to use any force whatsoever. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, at the front door, when you told the defendant to take his hands out of his pockets and put them up in the air, if he'd done that and been compliant and remained in that situation, there wouldn't have been any need for any force whatsoever. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And there would have been any need to use a taser
No, there wouldn't.
or any need to use your ballistic shields to rush the defendant and arrest him on the ground.
No, there wouldn't.
But he didn't comply, did he?
No, he did not.
He continued to resist. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And even during the arrest on the ground, to some extent, he did not comply but resisted the commands of your fellow officers. Isn't that right?
That would be correct.
Now, at some point, as you are participating in that arrest, you noticed the
Shit, Kathy, I don't even think Kathy knows yet. I don't even think you know. Whoa. Pumpkin won a shirt. Pumpkin won a shirt on Feral Friday. I think it was Feral Friday. It was one of these recent shows. Pumpkin won a freaking shirt.
Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
Just wanted to pass that news along. We've been working hard to get Pumpkin a shirt for a long time.
victim, a woman to your right. Is that right?
That is correct.
How far away from you was this woman in the chair, the photograph that the defense counsel showed you earlier? How far away was she?
As I was coming into the residence, she was probably about a foot and a half, 2 feet away from me. That's when I first noticed her. She wasn't a threat. So then I started to change my attention to other areas that could possibly be a threat to us.
So as you came in and were following the defendant and behind the two officers in front of you, you were not moving towards her. You were kind of moving away from her, but parallel to her in that room. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you didn't run into her.
No, I did not.
And in the effort to arrest the defendant, you never made any contact with her or any part of her body. Isn't that right?
No, and I was the closest officer that was to her as we entered.
So the other officers were even farther away from the victim as she sat in that chair than you were. Is that right?
That's correct. The other officers were to my left as I passed them on their right, and Ms. Clarkson was on my far right.
So as far as you know, neither you nor either of the other officers that were working with you disturbed or touched the victim as she sat in that chair. Is that
I'm going to
correct?
object. That would call for speculation. It's also complicated.
The question is compound, and therefore, if it's his observations, that's fine, but that's all he can testify as to what he saw.
First, did you do anything during the arrest of the defendant to disturb in any way the area surrounding the victim in this case?
No, I did not.
And did you see your fellow officers during the arrest and handcuffing of the defendant disturb the victim in any way?
No, I did not.
You were to the left of her, I guess, as you walked in.
As you walk in, you've got the chair where she was seated on the right-hand side, the banister would be on the left-hand side. Mr. Spector's on the left-hand side of me, and the other two officers are to my left.
Now, shortly after the defendant was brought down in that front room near where the victim was sitting in the chair, he was handcuffed, correct?
Yes, he was.
And sometime later transported to Alhambra Police Department.
Yes, he was.
Could I have a moment, please, Your Honor? To the best of your ability, did you follow Alhambra Police Department policy in making this arrest?
Yes, we did.
Now, after the defendant was handcuffed and arrested, did that conclude your efforts inside this house, or was there a search of the house?
There was a search of the house.
And the search of the house was initially to
That's
see
him
if there were
searching
other
that house.
suspects there, correct?
Suspects plus other victims, because we have no idea.
Going back to what we talked about earlier, when you first got this call, you just don't know how many victims there might be or how many people with guns there might be in a situation like this. A big house surrounded by brush and trees before dawn, right?
That is correct.
Could I have a moment?
You may.
At some point, you cleared the house. In other words, by clearing the house, you didn't find any other victims or suspects. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Later on, you told defense counsel that one of your fellow officers checked the vital signs of the victim and found that there were no signs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When you saw her, did you notice a handgun near one of her feet?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall which one?
I could refer to my notes because it is contained in my report. It was next to one of her calves.
Would that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it would.
May you do so? You looked at your report, correct?
Yes, I did.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
And do you recall seeing a gun?
Yes, I do.
And where?
It was underneath her left calf.
Thank you. Your Honor, could we put up, we're going to put up 29B, is that correct, Sudi? Thank you. I invite your attention to what we marked previously as People's 29B for identification. Do you see a weapon in the location where you located? In fact, we've blown it up for you.
Yeah, I can't tell if that's placard number 1, but that's where it is right there.
You might even have, may I approach?
You may.
We have our laser pointer here. Okay. Just push the red button. Using the laser pointer to blow up of People's 29B, could you indicate where you saw the weapon?
Yes, it was a blue steel revolver, I believe, with wood grips, and it's located right there underneath the left calf of the victim, Miss Clarkson.
And from what you saw when you made the arrest, neither you nor from what you saw, any of your fellow officers did anything to disturb...
No, I don't have a list. I need to do that. Also, I need to just change that link. I've never reached the threshold to actually get a payout in like over a year. It's very hard to do. It's got to be getting there though. Good Lord, if people still use it. But I don't plug it as much as I used to either. But I need to make like a wish list or something. People have always told me to do that.
Or the victim, her legs or any part of her body. Is that correct?
Calls for speculation as to what the others may have done.
Sustained is the form of the question.
Did you do anything that disturbed that weapon?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see any of your other officers do anything which disturbed that weapon?
No, and when we made our entry, I didn't see the gun skirting across the ground or anything else.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. You have a way, a bit, Mr. Brennan, I assume. I assume you have a bit of redirect. I'm sorry.
A modicum.
A modicum, okay. We're going to take our recess, ladies and gentlemen. Keep in mind the admonition will be in recess for 15 minutes. Once the jury is gone, there's something I need to put on the record. Thank you. The jurors and the alternates have left. I want to explain what took place at the bench before, and it also something I should have put on the record yesterday.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Judge Dowhard about that. Lay it the fuck down.
But I made an assumption it would come up on its own, and it did not. The gentleman who was at the bench with counsel and myself is Sammy Weiss, who represents Jody Gibson, who is a potential witness in this matter. Yesterday, the defense presented under seal, as we had discussed in court last week, an offer of proof as to what Ms. Gibson's testimony would be. based upon the offer of proof that I read in that sealed filing, I found that her testimony was inadmissible and irrelevant at this time. I have not forbidden her from testifying. It depends upon certain things that may happen during the trial, at which time the proffered testimony might become relevant, at which time she would become a witness. Because of the nature of her proposed testimony, I have made the findings required under California Rule of Court 2.550. I have found that it is highly, at this point, depending upon what happens, prejudicial to the people. It's also prejudicial to Lana Clarkson and her family, unless other matters come in which might change that. Because of that, I have sealed those records. I view that as being a limited sealing once the trial is over, and Ms. Gibson would not be subject to the order that witnesses not discuss this matter outside of court. Then I believe, since she would be able to discuss it, then there would be no longer any reason to seal the records, and they would probably, in my viewpoint, be unsealed. I will indicate that it's been brought to my attention that Ms. Gibson, although she has not been excused as a potential witness in this matter and is still under subpoena, that she has been emailing members of the media. She has been perhaps conducting interviews, which is inappropriate. I have told Mr. Weiss that there is two choices. Either he can get a signed statement from her that she understands she is still a potential witness and not to talk to the media, or she can come into court if she wishes to argue that, and she can make a presentation, at which point I'll make a ruling as to whether she's subject to that ruling. And I've also indicated if she defies that ruling that she'll be subject to all pertinent penalties for defying the court's valid order. So that is what we did. That's where we stand. And if anybody wants to offer anything else, that's fine. If not, we're in recess.
Awesome.
All right,
He
we're
is
in recess.
We're not done here. We still got 10 minutes in this video.
All right.
So.
All parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness are present as heretofore. And you may
Guess we're approaching the end of this day, maybe.
begin.
Officer Hammond, during Mr. Dixon's examination, we heard a lot about what didn't happen. Could have called a dog, but you didn't call a dog. Could have called a helicopter, but you didn't call a helicopter.
New merch.
Could have shot
New
him
merch
with a
in the
beanbag
shop.
gun, but you didn't shoot him
There's a
with a
link.
beanbag gun. He could have run upstairs,
Scan?
but he
People
didn't
do
run
that.
upstairs.
I want to make a poll. How many people scan
I
links
believe
like
we're getting
this?
to a question.
Almost.
Almost.
So
Let's speed the journey along. All right.
I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened but didn't happen, correct?
That's incorrect. We did call for a dog. We did try to get an airship. We did try to get resources that were around other cities, called other agencies to try to get those resources so we could do things.
Okay. But none of those things transpired. I mean, the dog didn't come, the helicopter didn't come, he didn't run, Mr. Spector didn't run upstairs and pour boiling oil on the people outside the castle. I mean, none of that happened, did it?
No, it did not.
Okay, so let's talk about what did happen. Mr. Spector came to the door, appeared to be in a confused or dazed state, correct?
Correct.
Turned around to enter the house and said, you guys have got to come in and see this, or you got to come in and see this, correct?
Correct.
And officers came in and took him into custody, correct?
Yes, we did.
And there were 4 officers that came into the foyer area to assist in the arrest, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Berenger, could we see the exhibit again, because of the lighting condition, it's a little bit difficult to see, but what would you estimate the distance between...
You guys know the sound effect that happens in the Mario game when he gets big? Like when he eats the, whatever the fuck he eats. Mushroom, right? Does the mushroom make him bigger? Whatever makes him like bigger and you get the bonk, bonk, bonk. I need that sound effect and I can make myself bigger. Bonk, bonk, bonk.
Ms. Clarkson's feet and the wall to the west, what would you estimate the distance to be?
We're talking the wall behind her, or are we talking the stairs?
Stairway wall.
The mega mushroom.
We're talking this area here?
Yes.
Okay. I would say there's approximately
I want to put
4
that as a
feet.
note.
And the 4 officers passed by that area in order to confront Mr. Spector, who was standing a little bit more in the lower portion of the photograph. Is that right?
Yes, it'd be in this general area right here.
Okay. And as you approached Mr. Spector, you didn't have your eyes on the floor, did you?
I had my eyes everywhere, trying to make sure we were safe going through the door.
But you're primarily looking at Mr. Spector to make sure he doesn't do something that would endanger you or your fellow officers, correct?
I had two people that were in front of me. That was their primary concern.
Is this going to come through? Yeah, I've got to get that. Boom, boom, boom. I will get it though. That'll be cool. Be incredibly random, but
Me being the third one in line, my primary concern is to make sure that nobody comes out of a closet, nobody comes out of a doorway or anything else and emerges upon us.
I believe you told Mr. Dixon that, as far as you know, you didn't see the gun scooted or moved across the floor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In terms of somebody else knocking it during the point that they were placing Mr. Spector on the ground, you wouldn't have any way of knowing that, would you?
In my direct line of sight, I saw nothing moving in front of it.
I'm sorry?
I saw nothing moving in my direct line of sight as I entered the residence.
Well, I understand that, but I'm talking about during the process where Detective P had, he was on Mr. Spector's back, was he not?
Yes, he was.
And initially, he had both Mr. Spector's right hand and his left hand in his grasp. Is that correct?
No, I believe he did not have the left hand until after I grabbed Mr. Spector's right hand, and then we had to try to pull Mr. Spector's left arm out from underneath him.
Okay. When Detective P was on Mr. Spector's back, he had one of his knees located in the middle of his back. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
All right, we're going to ask him to step in a minute, but the force that you used to pull Mr. Spector's arm from beneath his body and from above his head to below to behind his back.
Get in here.
You wanted to do that as swiftly and as efficiently as you could. Is that right?
That would be correct.
And do we have? We don't have Detective P yet. We're getting Detective P. I just want you to identify him so that we'll have a sense of his. That's lawyer employee. This gentleman here in the suit, rather handsome fellow, is that Detective P?
Yes, it is.
And he's 6'1", 230, more or less?
That would be a good estimate, yes.
Okay.
Why don't we ask him? How tall are you?
6'1".
How much do you weigh?
About 240 now.
Judge.
Okay.
See, try to be nice.
I don't know if you guys know, after the day's done here in the court, Judge Dowhard, Larry Fiddler heads on down to the comedy club, and he just walks up. He just comes on in. They know him. Larry, get in here. He's going to get a set. 15 minutes for Fiddler.
Do you need him anymore for right now?
I told him I was going to mark him as an exhibit.
Yeah,
but his
okay, let's
sergeant
get
asked
the
me
hell
not
in
to.
there.
All right.
No, he can be excused.
All right, we'll call you as soon as we're done here. Thank you.
So, anyway, the two of you used sufficient force to place Mr. Spector's hands and arms behind his back so that he could be handcuffed. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And the taser, when the taser is discharged into someone, can that cause bruising, do you know?
I've seen bruising, yes.
Okay. Did you notice at some point after Mr. Spector was arrested that he had substantial bruising on the front of his body?
I did not notice, no.
Now, Mr. Dixon asked you if Mr. Spector resisted or continued to resist as he was on the floor there, and you fellows were taking him into custody. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And again, there was no physical resistance, was there? He wasn't fighting you or trying to kick at you. There was nothing like that happening, was there?
No, he was not.
As a matter of fact, he was trying to tell you something, wasn't he?
Objection. Maybe approach?
Yeah, I think we need to approach on that.
Office. Is it Detective now, by the way?
Yes, it is.
Detective Hammond, when Mr. Spector was on the ground and the officers, you and Detective P were handcuffing him, did he make a statement to you to the effect, I can explain, let me explain something along that line?
I don't recall any statements.
Question was a little bit misleading. Did he make a statement, I can tell you what happened? Do you recall that?
Same objection.
Now we need to approach. Gentlemen, the question was whether I can explain, which this witness has no recollection of. That's stricken because there's no response to it, so you're to disregard it. You may proceed.
Thank you. After Mr. Spector was handcuffed, was he lifted up off the floor at some point by the officer?
Yes.
And was that by the arms, biceps?
It was, when you lift somebody up when they're laying down, you try to roll them over and then lift them up in a seating position to pull them up. We just don't try to grab the arms and jerk them up.
But when the report says he was lifted by his arms, where on his arms was he lifted?
If you're talking to the point when we're trying to get the left arm out from underneath his body to get him handcuffed, at that point I'm just trying to lift him up probably by the belt, maybe by his right arm, to lift him up just a little bit so we can get a little bit of hands underneath there to pull an arm out.
Okay. At some point, did you see an officer with his hand or hands on Mr. Spector's upper arm?
While we're trying to cuff, yes.
Okay. Based on your knowledge or your observation, you didn't see anybody other than Officer Cardello come into contact with Miss Clarkson in the foyer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. I take it then that you would not know how thumbprint got on the bottom of her shoe at some point during the course of the investigation.
That seems back on evidence that was one of the officers.
Rephrase the question and I'll see if it's admissible.
Do you have any knowledge of how a thumbprint, or excuse me, a fingerprint would have gotten on the bottom of Miss Clarkson's shoe?
I have no knowledge.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Recross?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, subject to recall. You may step down. Thank you for
Thank
being
you, Your
here.
Honor.
You'll call Detective P, I believe, is the next one.
Your Honor, I'm going to not call him. This officer testified to everything that Officer P knew.
Okay, can we excuse him then?
No objection.
All right, if you'll let him know, thank him for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
Boom. Where are we going next? Out of interest here. Okay, 28 minutes with LA County Department of Coroner supervising criminalist Dan Anderson. Okay, new guy jumping in. I'll have to make a new thing. Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it. I was we were talking a little bit earlier about DDPY, or DDP yoga. Yeah, I would recommend this split to anybody that is kind of having any kind of issues with like mobility or, even strength. But like the cool thing about it is you could start as low as possible, which is where I currently am at in the bed. But if you Google it and look up some of the insane stories, like there's been guys that have been essentially, crazy spinal injuries. They can barely move, barely bend over, barely walk, canes, walkers, wheelchairs, and they can get back to where they can pretty much just be completely normal. It's actually insane. Like, there's some really wild videos out there that, again, testimonials that. But yeah, I've been using it, and I started at the bed. I've tried it many different times over the years, and I always find that it kind of helps and works at first, but I always start at like the middle because I feel like, I'm past the bed, but no, you should start at the lowest and just kind of let your body build up slowly. I think that is the way. And yeah, I'm getting ready next week to advance the chair. I've been doing it all year. I'm just past 4 weeks. And yeah, it's a lot of people in chat thinking about it because, I sit all day long. I work where I work, I sit. I'm back here. I'm always editing. I'm always doing something, even when you're just chilling, right? So yeah, getting up and moving. But yeah, I think it's helpful. I'm going to try to add a few more things, of course, but yeah, I think it would be helpful for some folks. Who's in here right now, hanging out? So Kaylin coming through here. Dude, this hat came from Dan Kalin. He got me this for Christmas. This is not in the store. This one is a custom made. I can't, you know what I mean? Like, when I opened the box, I was blown away. I was like, whoa, dude, this is insane. Oh, Forrest coming in perfect timing there. What's up, dude? Yeah, anybody that did not see Feral Friday, go check it out. It's been getting, again, rave reviews from folks. It was just me and Bob shooting the shit on Friday night, talking cases and talking life. It was really cool. It was really good. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. I'm going to put that link in the chat here. Definitely going to be having Bob back on here soon. I'm going to try to get Allie back on here soon, too. Maybe them together, but yeah, I like talking to both those people, man. I like their show. I like the way they kind of cover stuff. Covered differently than any other defense attorney on YouTube. I think they cover it the correct way. They don't go in out the gate just in a position. They let the time kind of disperse their thoughts or their opinions, which is awesome. And that's how I am. And I was even talking to him like, dude, I'm always endlessly flip-flopping on these things. If you follow me on X, it'll probably drive you crazy because so many people get so just staunch into their opinions and they're just stuck there and they're not going to move. Dude, that's not the way, man. You've just got to, if anybody's watching me with Natalie Cochran, I've been flip-flopping on that one. I still don't fully fucking know. How could you fully fucking know? But yeah, I probably couldn't. I think she did it, but yeah, I don't know, man. I really enjoy the way that they watch stuff. Yo, Young Black Economist coming in here. The first Publicly Buzzed stream I watched was Bob, I think. That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, if you didn't see Friday, check it out. It was a really fun one. It was a good one. All right, we're going to keep rolling here. Thanks, everyone, for coming in. I appreciate it. I think we're only one name away from a whale. Here we go through the Venmo. Kathy coming through here. Passing the plate for Pastor Steve. And guess what she gave? $4.20. If I'm not mistaken, that gets us up to 11. So let me just see. Let's do the count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes, we're right there. Boom. Love to see it. So yeah, next time somebody comes through, whether that's the Cash App, the Venmo, the PayPal, whatever the hell, if you become a member, you get some extra content if you become a member on the wheel and a possibility. This time I'm going to be giving away some stickers. But yeah, get on this thing. Get on the wheel. We give away stickers, t-shirts. You never know what's going to be coming down the pike. And I appreciate everyone for coming in here. Yep. Yeah, my mom's doing good. Yeah, I did have to cancel, and I am rescheduling Hella. We're going to be having that conversation, just about that hearing in Coburger, and probably just Coburger stuff in general. But I do want to talk to her really because, yeah, I think she's one of the most informed people on a lot of the science and the IgG stuff, and I think that'll be cool to have her on here. And yeah, honestly, help me out because a lot of that stuff, I enjoy the arguments, and that's my favorite part. And I actually do enjoy Hippler, and I'm believe it or not, I'm way more in the middle of that than not. I can't wait to actually see how this thing's laid out in trial. But yeah, I think she's going to come in and lay it down. It's going to be a cool show. So I got to reschedule with her. But today at 3 p.m., I have Mo from Mo in the Deep End coming in. We're going to be watching an interrogation from 1989. It's going to be an absolutely wild one. The Butcher of Tompkins Square Park, Daniel Rakowitz. I'm just going to read a little bit here about him, who gained infamy for the murder of his girlfriend, Monica Breeley. Living in New York City, Lower East Side, Rakowitz killed Breeley after an argument, dismembered her body, and allegedly cooked parts of her remains into soup, which he claimed to have served to the homeless in Tompkins Square Park. So yeah, you're going to want to come through and hang out and watch that with us. It's going to be intense, I do believe. Yeah, no, not today. Yeah, the other one won't be today. I'm going to have to reschedule that one. Yeah. The Hella one's not today. I think I rescheduled it for the. I just put a date on there. I think for next Saturday, but that's not even official either. I need to talk to her and see what's going on to get another time frame for her. But yeah, at least 2 shows today though. After this one, you definitely come back at 3.
Sure, my name's Dan Anderson.
Dan Anderson, let me get that.
Anderson, Anderson.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. Anderson, how are you employed?
I am employed with the Los Angeles County Department of Coroner as a supervising criminalist.
Okay, and were you so employed back in February of 2003?
I was.
And do you have a particular area in criminalistics that you dedicate your time to in the coroner's office?
My duties as a supervisor in the laboratory is both toxicology and criminalistics.
Okay, I want to ask you whether or not you had any responsibility in the death of Lana Clarkson as it relates to toxicology on behalf of the coroner's office.
I did.
And direct your attention back to February of 2003. What was your responsibility and involvement?
In regards to toxicology, the toxicology laboratory was responsible for the analysis of Lana Clarkson's autopsy specimens for drugs, as well as our laboratory actually conducted the toxicological analysis on Philip Spector's urine.
Okay. Could you tell the members of the jury essentially what a toxicologist does in the analysis of these substances that you've just described?
A toxicologist is a scientist who analyzes for drugs or poisons from biological materials. We're mostly chemists. We do chemical extractions from the biological materials and look specifically with instrumentation that can detect the drugs that we're interested in.
It's going to be crazy.
Okay. And as a toxicologist, do you have any special education or training in that field to qualify you to do that work?
Oh, God.
Education-wise, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from Colorado State University in 1988. I have a Master's of Science degree from University of New Haven in Connecticut in 1990. And basically, since 1990, I've been employed as a toxicologist with the LA County Coroner's Office, as well as Ventura County Sheriff's Department, for a stint of 1 year there. I belong to numerous professional organizations. I am certified by...
Probably fucking like the Toxic Avenger pissing, right?
The American Board of Criminalistics, as well as the American Board of Forensic Toxicologists.
Okay. So a toxicologist essentially looks at biological specimens and tries to determine what chemicals or other substances might be in them. Is that true?
That's a correct statement.
Okay. And what type of biological specimens do you typically look at the coroner's office when you do the type of work that you do?
Well, our work is dictated basically on the pathologist, what he actually submits to us. Mostly we're dealing with blood samples either from a heart or a central area or a femoral blood. We receive liver specimens, gastric specimens, vitreous or eyeball fluid, kidney, spleen, urine, bile, you name it, whatever they submit, we can basically pull out the drugs of interest from the biological material.
And you basically act at the request of the pathologist who essentially ask you to screen for various substances, is that correct?
We act on their directive, but we also are scientists that we make our own interpretations and we act on our own instincts also.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you, in this particular case, got a specimen from Philip Spector, and how did that come about? If you could explain that to the jury.
You want to time travel for a second?
Well, it is unusual that the coroner's office is involved with an antemortem or before death type sample. The laboratory did receive a phone call from the handling detectives of the Sheriff's Department asking for our assistance in analyzing this particular urine.
And who were they that you just referred to, the handling detectives, if you can remember?
Well, I didn't personally take the phone call myself, but I believe it was either Katz and Lillefeld.
Okay. Does the Sheriff's Department have their own toxicology experts, or do they not?
They do.
Okay, so, but for some reason they made the request of the coroner.
This goes from to 2018, but check out this like video that goes. It shows like cell phones. Hold on, let me get Phil off here for just a second. This is just trippy. This is just crazy. How much they've changed. You got spotting some that you had. Seen that razor. Dan was always rocking a razor there for a while. Then you get into the iPhone era here. I think Dan had that one too, that one face one. They were trying to keep the buttons alive for a while. The buttons are coming back though. That little BlackBerry one was real popular. And BlackBerry just kind of died. That one there looked familiar too. They've just gotten bigger though. That LG one, I think I had that one. Yeah, that was crazy. It tripped me out.
Coroner's office, is that true?
Well, the reason I was told they made that request was that we were able to screen a more comprehensive, broader panel of drugs, and more so than what they could do.
Okay, so your laboratory was just basically better suited to do.
Yeah, why didn't they start with the really big one? Actually, they started with they should have started with like the Zach Morris phone, right?
That they wanted, correct? In other words, they were able to test for different things that they could not test for.
Right, we could test for more of the esoteric drugs.
Okay, and so you received a type of specimen. What type of specimen did you receive?
It was a urine specimen.
Okay, and was it in a particular type of container?
That one's pretty big.
Yes, it was in a typical 50 milliliter centrifuge plastic tube that I have commonly seen before.
Okay, was it a screw top or a stopper top, if you remember?
It was a screw top.
Okay, does that type of tube, were you familiar with that type of tube and whether or not it had any type of preservative in it or not?
I'm not sure about that preservative in there, depending on if maybe the laboratory added their own preservative in there.
You're not aware of whether it did or not, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, in any event, you did a drug screen on this particular urine sample, is that true?
Correct.
And I take it that the tube had some type of labeling that associated it with Philip Spector, is that also correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you test it for drugs?
We tested it for a lot of drugs.
Okay, so let me go through the drugs and ask if you tested for this and what the results were. I'll just go through the laundry list as best I can. Did you test this tube? And it was a purple top tube, is that correct?
It was a purple plastic cap tube.
Okay, and basically the different types of tubes have different uses in the field of toxicology, is that correct?
Well, you're you're confusing the clinical colored blood draws that we commonly go to the laboratories and you see all the different colors that the phlebotomist
person that takes the blood.
This is he's me.
Thank you.
He's me, phlebotomist.
Draws into the colored top tubes. What I got was nothing more than just a plastic tube that happened to have a purple colored cap to it. It doesn't represent a preservative whatsoever.
Okay, very good. That was my point, and I wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Now, did you test for barbiturates?
Yes.
And what was the result of your toxicology work that you tested for barbiturates on?
It's different.
Not
Brooklyn?
detected.
Now, how do you test for these drugs?
Brooklyn, I was anticipating your presence today. Welcome in here.
Brooklyn! In other words, you must use some type of machinery or analytical instruments, correct?
Correct. I mean, a variety of drugs we're able to do a generic screening panel. It's an antigen-antibody reaction where we're able to predict whether the sample will either have the drug or not. For barbiturates, we screen for a larger class of different types of barbiturates that will cross-react with the screen. And if the screen is positive, it'll move on for confirmation. In this particular case, it was negative, and the report reflects such.
Okay, and so this instrument that you use, or this analytical method, is it something that's generally relied upon by toxicologists?
Yes, it's used nationwide.
Okay, and the instrumentation that you use to do this testing, do you verify that it's working correctly before you utilize it?
Yes, we do.
How do you do that? If you could just tell the jury generally what you do to make sure it's working correctly.
Sure. In any forensic laboratory, you have to run, or you have to have a proper quality control, quality assurance program within the laboratory. With that, with every test that you actually do, you have to run known analytical standards. In other words, I'm testing for a barbiturate. I have to run a known barbiturate sample alongside the case sample to verify that, yes, the test is working, and no, the case does not have this particular barbiturate in it.
Okay, and so you ran the test and it was negative, and then you also tested for some other drugs. Is that true?
Correct.
Did you test for cocaine and cocaine-related drugs?
Yes, we did.
And how did you do that, and what was the result?
Well, the result, the cocaine and all its metabolites was negative. In this particular case, the screening technique actually was positive for cocaine or its metabolites, so it had to move on for confirmation. Confirmation of it is actually sampling the sample once again by another analyst, doing a full chemical extraction, specifically isolating cocaine and its metabolites, and putting it onto a gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, or GCMS for short. It's basically a scientific instrument, court accepted, nationwide type deal.
Okay, so the ultimate result was that there was no cocaine or any other related cocaine substances in Mr. Spector's urine. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's positive, even though there might have been the screen wasn't certain, the specific test was negative. Is that correct?
Correct. The screen is a presumptive test. The confirmatory is what really tells you what's going on.
Okay, so there's no question in your mind, based upon the toxicology results, that Mr. Spector in his urine had no cocaine or other related substances. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. Then did you test for fentanyl?
Yes.
Methamphetamine?
Yes.
And what were the results of those two
Cheney.
tests?
Not detected.
You got a shirt on the way too. BG's arrived in Canada. I haven't checked your tracking yet though, but definitely should be coming.
Did you just do testing for opiates and opiate-related substances such as hydrocodone?
Correct.
And what was the result of that test?
Not detected as well.
Okay, and PCP or phencyclidine?
Yes.
Negative?
Not detected, yes.
Then did you also test for, you spell it TOPIRAMATE, that particular substance?
Topiramate, or
topiramate.
trade name of Topamax.
Okay, is that, when you say trade name, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's what Topiramate is a chemical name. Topamax is the trade name, what the chemical or the pharmaceutical companies will solicit it as.
Okay, so you tested for, that's not a drug type test, is it? In other words, that's not a drug abuse type.
No, it's a prescription medication.
Okay, and what was the result of your testing with reference to that?
Well, the topiramate, we found 37 micrograms per milliliter in the urine sample.
And was that a specific test or a screening test? If you could explain what type of testing was done in that regard.
It was a specific test for topiramate, specifically quantitating the urine sample for that substance.
And was that done with a GC mass spectrometer?
It was.
Okay, so that was the more detailed instrumentation that your laboratory has, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's one of the types of tests for that particular drug, that prescription drug, that your laboratory can test for, whereas the sheriff's laboratory is not able to do that. Is that correct?
I don't necessarily know the capabilities of what the sheriff's department was able to do. I was provided a list of drugs that Mr. Spector had access to, and asked to account for as many of them as I could.
Okay.
And one of them being Topamax or topiramate.
Okay. Was it your understanding that when the law enforcement officials were in Mr. Spector's residence that they noted that he had certain prescription medications, and then your laboratory was asked to test for those as to whether or not they were in his system at the time?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, were there other pharmaceutical type prescription drugs that you tested for other than the one that you just mentioned?
Yes, there's quite a few of them.
Let's go down your list. You've got a report that you authored. What's the first one? It starts with an F, and can you pronounce that,
yes.
please?
We conduct a basic drug screen. It's
Yeah, I think that they
for a
this
toxicologist.
is
It's
a
called a
crazy
basic
one.
drug shakeout.
I don't even know what I
We
would do
catch
if I
all
was
the
on the
basic
street.
drugs,
I mean,
which can be
there's so much
typically
info.
hundreds of them. They include your
Being batted in your. We have a week
antidepressants,
break.
your,
These people are getting it every day.
Antipsychotic medications, your antihistamines. They all kind of fall in that class of basic drugs. The first one is fluoxetine. Fluoxetine is commonly known as Prozac. It's an antidepressant that we detected in Mr. Spector's urine, as well as its metabolite, or fluoxetine.
Okay, what's the difference between the drug itself and the metabolite? Can you explain what the difference is and also why you look for both?
Sure. When somebody ingests a drug, a parent drug as I call it, or the Prozac, your body will naturally metabolize or it will chemically alter or try to get rid of that drug out of your system. It'll inactivate it. Okay? And what it does is you take in Prozac or fluoxetine, your body will actually metabolize it to norfluoxetine, and you try to excrete it out of your system. It tries to get rid of it.
Okay, so
That's a
once
good
the drug
idea,
gets
actually.
processed, I take it through the liver? Is that?
Like each
It
day,
does,
each
yeah.
time we see
And
him,
basically it
a
breaks
ghoulie
down, and then
is
you're
it a
able
day?
to detect both the broken down
Ghoulie level. Ghoulness
metabolite
level.
of the drug and the drug itself
found
to show
famous
that there's some that
ghouls.
hasn't been processed and then some that has been processed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
All right,
did you
on that-
find...
On that note, Mr. Ford, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch recess. It's noon. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, when it's motherfucking lunch in a courtroom and a judge knows it's let's go, all right? They'll stop it in on a dime. They're like, listen, it's 12. Let's go. Stop. I need nourishment.
Keep in mind the admonition, 1:30 this afternoon. The witness will return at that time. Thank you.
Session.
All right, all parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness are present is heretofore. You may resume.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson. I wanted to kind of continue where we left off, and right before our noon
I'm gonna
recess,
work
you
on
had
that.
talked
It's
about
gonna
the
take me a minute,
Prozac and
but-
both the active ingredient
I'm
and
gonna see if I can
the...
get like a maybe a chart level or like a graphic I can pop up for like what he's looking like that day and like different types of famous schools, like, you know, of course the Crypt Keeper. We could throw in maybe a zombie. There's got to be some more ghouly type stuff. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research. That's a good idea.
processed ingredient of that drug. And
I'm
basically...
gonna put that down too.
Is there any question
You're
about
damn right.
the fact that both the metabolite and the active ingredient of Prozac was found in Mr. Spector's urine sample?
No doubt.
And you feel that the scientific testing process that was done by your laboratory was done in a proper manner?
Yes.
Now, did you screen the urine sample that was taken from Mr. Spector for other prescription medications, a list of a number of other ones?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and did you do that at the request of the Sheriff's Department along with the ones that you've already talked about?
Yes, I was given a list by the Sheriff's Department to account for all the medications that I was able to.
Okay, and I don't want to go through the names of all of them because they're very difficult to pronounce, but there looks like about 7 more prescription medications that you tested for that came back not detected. Is that correct?
There's actually only 5, although there's 7 names.
Okay. Did you ever get the prescription med?
There he is, ghoul sighting right now. Right now we could be comparing him to other ghouls. That is a good idea, yeah.
Medication
See if I can get
known
that
as
out this week.
Neurontin. Did you get that on your list to test for?
Neurontin is also known as gabapentin, yes.
Okay, and did you test for Viagra? Did they ask you to test for that?
It was on the list, yes.
Okay, so did you test for that?
No, we did not test for Viagra.
And what would be your reason for not doing that?
Well, one, we didn't have an analytical method at that particular time for Viagra. 2, the amount of sample that was given to our laboratory was to the minimum. It was extremely small. So I didn't want to waste a whole lot of specimen on tests that I knew I wasn't going to be able to perform. So I was able to accomplish the most I could out of what was given to me.
Okay. So did they test for Neurontin before, or do you know?
Who's they?
Did anybody test for Neurontin, as far as you know?
Well, in some of our screening techniques, I was actually able to see gabapentin in this particular urine. Although not reported, we were able to see it on an analytical method to be able to say there's some type of breakdown product of it. But again, we weren't completely set up analytically to to verify gabapentin was really in the system. So I can look through the chromatograms, I can look through the scientific work. Experts can look through it as well, besides myself, and say, yes, they saw something that resembles gabapentin.
Okay, and that has the sort of the street or more common name of Neurontin, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and how about Viagra? Does it have a sort of a pharmaceutical name that it goes by, starts with an S? Sildenafil?
Yes, it's called sildenafil.
Okay, and did you were able to test for that or not test for that?
There he is.
I was not, no.
Were you requested by somebody to do that?
Not specifically, no.
They never asked you to even test for it, is that true? It was not a concern of theirs as far as you were aware, is that true?
Speculation as to what was not a concern of someone else.
Unless someone indicated it to you. Did anybody indicate it was a concern?
Like I said before, they gave me a list and say, account for the ones I'm able to account for.
Okay.
And that was it.
Viagra was not on the list.
Viagra was on the list.
Hit that bell. Make sure the bell is clicked.
Who gave
If
you
you are new here, make sure the notification bell is clicked. That will be very helpful. When I go live, when I post videos, it would hopefully give you an alert.
list?
The list was provided by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
And was it a written list?
It was a written list.
Okay, do you happen to have it with you?
I do.
Okay, if I could take a minute and take a look at it?
Sure.
Oh, that's okay. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have a minute, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just have it. Okay. Thank you. So you weren't able to test for Viagra. Was that because you didn't have the right instrumentation or you didn't have the right controls? How would you explain that?
Viagra, or the chemical name is sildenafil, is a very large drug, or chemically large for purposes of detecting it. One, it doesn't extract very well, and two, you need a specialized instrument to actually see it. And at that particular time, we did not have that type of instrument within our laboratory.
Would it be correct that had you chosen to do that, you could send it to a laboratory, at least the specimen, to another laboratory that could test for it if that was something you wanted to do?
Well, at someone's cost, yes.
Right. In other words, it might cost somebody a few dollars to do it, but you could send it to a laboratory that had that capability if that was a concern. Is that true?
If there was a laboratory in the nation that could actually test for it, yes, someone could test for it.
Okay. I want to move now, Mr. Anderson, to another testing that was done by your laboratory. And is it correct that your laboratory also tested some biological specimens from Lana Clarkson?
That's correct.
Okay. And generally,
Dude, I know.
her testing and the testing on her biological specimens, did they go through sort of a routine analysis based upon a request by Dr. Pena?
That's correct.
And what was tested for with reference to Ms. Clarkson as far as drugs, alcohol, that type of thing, if you could just tell us that?
Sure. Dr. Pena basically requested a comprehensive drug panel to be conducted on Ms. Clarkson's samples. We run through a full battery of tests, presumptive tests as well as confirmatory. And basically the two specimens, both Spector and Lana Clarkson's, had the same type of tests performed. And the positive results for Clarkson's blood included alcohol or ethanol, diphenhydramine or Benadryl, a chemical name of norchlorcyclazine, which is a metabolite of a couple of antihistamines, as well as naproxen or naproxen, however you like to say it.
Hydrocodone?
Oh, yes, hydrocodone was there also.
Okay, and what's the street or common name for that? Would it be Vicodin?
What's up?
Well, that's one of them. There's a ton of trade names out there for hydrocodone as the chemical. There's Vicodin, Loratab. There's a bunch of them.
And specifically, what was the analytical result for the Vicodin, or the hydrocodone, excuse me?
It was 0.07 micrograms per milliliter.
And was the hydrocodone testing, was it done in a scientifically acceptable manner by your laboratory?
Yes.
Okay. Essentially, that was the same test that was done on the urine for Mr. Spector, only this was a blood sample, correct?
Correct.
Is a blood sample more suitable for testing than a urine specimen, or is it?
Analytically, I don't care what I'm given, whether it's blood, urine, liver, what have you. The analytical
There we
test
go.
is
That's a wheel in the bag. Jersey Gin coming through. Close that wheel out and spin, baby, spin. Well, well.
Give me the loop. Give me the loop.
Love it. Thank you, Jim.
identical. It's just taking a different matrix, that what you're given, and performing the same chemical extraction for the drug that you're interested in.
Okay. So the alcohol testing on the blood of Ms. Clarkson, was that on two different samples of blood, one from the heart, one from the femoral artery?
That's correct.
Okay, and one was a 0.12 and the other was a 0.14, is that correct?
That's correct.
With reference to Ms. Clarkson, all the other drugs, and I won't go through them, were also tested for, and those were the ones that you mentioned are the only ones that came back with a positive result. Was that true?
True.
Okay. If I could have a minute, Your Honor.
No minutes for you. Kaylin starting this one out. Jen getting a couple chances here.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Very briefly, I may have missed this, Mr. Anderson, and if you talked about it, then just correct me. Did you also test for, in the urine sample that you got from Mr. Spector, did you also test for ETOH?
Objection Foundation, and also a video program.
Well, you can try, certainly. You may proceed. Yes.
Thank you. I think I asked you, did you also screen for, in Mr. Spector's urine sample, ETOH, or commonly referred to as drinking alcohol?
Tammy's getting multiple
Yes, we
chances.
did.
And what was the result?
0.07 gram percent.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Redirect.
Yeah, just briefly. Mr. Anderson, how long have you been involved in the field of toxicology here in the state of California as an expert?
17 years.
And is a urine alcohol, is it considered scientifically acceptable currently?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
Thank you guys so much for that.
Are there
It's fucking dope,
certain
man. Buzz Nation.
things that have
They
to
don't
be
fuck
done in order
around.
for a urine
That's what I've
alcohol
learned.
result to be
I'm the fuck through.
to be accurate and to be valid?
Wish I
Well,
could
the
control my
analysis of a
no
urine
control
for
over it.
alcohol is always going to be accurate and valid as long as the laboratory performs all the proper quality control. So if you're asking me, is the 0.07 accurate number? Yes, it is. It's very accurate.
Okay. In
If
other
you're
words-
asking me interpretively from that 0.07, what can I say? I'm not going to venture there.
Okay, and that's where I want to at least ask some questions. You can analytically tell how much alcohol is in a particular urine sample at a particular time, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Pumpkin, not the last one, but did win the one before that, I believe. Yeah, Pumpkin's a winner. Pumpkin's gotten a shirt.
Can you go back in time and, depending upon how the sample was collected or whether there was a preservative in the bottle, does that cause any interpretation problems if those foundational facts aren't established?
It can, if the person has to do some retrospective interpretation of it, try to back extrapolate from that number.
Basically, alcohol in urine pools up. In other words, it accumulates
Yeah,
over
she just looked right at him. She was like, this son of a bitch is sleeping.
time. Is that true?
Ethanol is very water soluble, so yes, it likes the water.
Okay, so would it be correct that if, in order to understand how much alcohol was in a person's system at a time prior to when the alcohol sample was collected from a urine void, you'd have to know whether or not a preservative was placed in the sample? That would be one thing you'd need to know, correct?
If you're referring to back extrapolation, I'm not very comfortable in going after that.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When a urine sample is collected and you want to do alcohol testing on it, is it customary to have a preservative in the urine container so that urine doesn't get generated from the time it's collected to the time it's tested.
Objection, that's vague. So the urine doesn't get generated?
I think you misspoke.
Maybe that alcohol doesn't get generated.
Well, a custom practice is kind of a vague term to me, because custom to who? Speaking from my own laboratory at the coroner's office, we do not preserve a urine sample at the coroner's office.
You just don't collect it typically, is that true?
That's not true either. It's at the discretion of the pathologist, as well as typically a urine is not preserved with.
All right, another little breaky poo just because. All right.
We're going to need your all's help. Now, when she gets ready to hop into the tank, help her out by cheering for her. Go, Swifty, go. Go, Swifty, go. Come on, Pink. Go, Swifty, go.
Oh, shit!
Go, Swifty, go. That's what I'm talking about right there. Yeah, doing a little piggy diving about. We're going to need your all's help. Now, when she gets...
Pig diving.
In order to stop the alcohol being generated in the sample itself, does a preservative need to be put in the container?
Some of the preservatives are there for anticoagulation, such for blood. Some of the preservatives are there for anti-enzymatic.
Good dive. He jumped half the damn thing.
And if you're dealing with possible fermentation of glucose in a urine sample to ethanol, I believe it's a yeast or a fungus reaction. And I don't necessarily know that particular preservative that I'm familiar with, sodium fluoride, would actually stop that or inhibit that.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, with reference to urine and alcohol and contents thereof, why don't you extrapolate back in time? Why doesn't your laboratory do that?
Well, typically we're able to analyze an alcohol from a blood sample. The urine, urine analysis for alcohol or ethanol, we use just for collaboration. Typically when, at the coroner's office, the person is dead, and therefore the blood value that we get is at the time of death. There's really no reason to actually back extrapolate from a urine sample when I've got a blood value.
Okay. Have you ever been involved in doing toxicological testing of urine samples where you did try to extrapolate back? Is that something that you've done in your career?
No, it has not.
Okay. Do you know whether that's something that's scientifically acceptable to do or not?
I don't know. I mean, if they take urine samples all the time in traffic accidents or DUIs, so
Okay.
I'm sure it's being done in the courtroom somewhere.
Is it your understanding they still do that? They take urine samples?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Nothing further.
Thank you. Recross?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, subject to recall, you're excused. Thank you for being here. You may step down. The next witness, please.
Who we got next? Mr. Dan Anderson is leaving. And we're going to go into, moving along here, an hour and a half. We got that in us. That'll probably finish us up. Dr. Robert Middleberg, toxicologist. Let me get you over here, sir. Now let's go ahead and spin a wheel here also real quick. We're going to give away some stickers. We're going to give away the trio, the Holy Trinity, which, of course, the Murder Church Classic, which I've got I think it's a magnet. I can't even remember. I've got something else coming. Boom, classic, and then the Meowder Church. A lot of people have been getting stickers. I've been getting messages. Love it. Let's give a spin. Let me turn my background off so we can see each other. All right, I think we got this. Good luck, everyone. My little old wheel. By making fun of my guy. Ooh, that's a smooth guy right there, dude. My lord, where's he at? I think that's... What's on the green one? Oh, it's Sheila. Sheila getting the win today. The Irish stickies coming through. Well, yeah, Sheila. Thank you so much. Bada bing, bada boom. Show some love in the chat. She's still in here? This morning? Should be. Hell yeah. Well, we love it. Now let her know. Hell yeah. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's keep rocking and rolling. Let me get... Yeah, I got this dude's name. Again, anyone that just came through, we have another show today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Going to have Mo on here for Mo in the Deep End. And then we're going to be watching an insane interrogation. The Butcher of Tompkins Square Park. It's going to be a doozy.
Alan, A-L-A-N, Middleburg, M-I-D-D-L-E-B-E-R-G.
Winner circle.
Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Middleburg.
Good afternoon.
Okay. You
Oh, we
are
got
Linda
Kinney
expression, a
Bond.
forensic toxicologist.
Start now.
What is a forensic toxicologist?
Very simply, when we break the two terms apart, a toxicologist is somebody who studies toxicology, which is the adverse effects of chemicals on living systems or living organisms, or humans for that matter. Some people sum it up as the study of poisons, but I think it's much more than that. Forensic, of course, means of or pertaining to the law, so we apply principles of toxicology to matters of the law.
Okay. And in fact, you knew this jury just had some testimony from another toxicologist. You know Dan Anderson?
I do.
Okay. And you're both toxicologists?
Yes.
Okay. And where do you work?
I work at a company called NMS Labs in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania.
And what is your position at NMS Labs as we sit here today, or stand here today?
Besides being a practicing forensic toxicologist, I'm also the laboratory director and vice president of quality assurance.
There she goes.
And what type of lab
Oh, yeah,
is
Sheila.
NMS? What does it do?
We are a privately held company that gets samples really in two ways. We do both clinical toxicology and forensic toxicology. Clinical toxicology, very simply, is if you're on some medication and your doctor wants to know if you're being overdosed or underdosed, or if you're taking your medication, he or she will draw a sample and send it to a lab like ours, and we'll test it to see what kind of concentration of a material you may have in you. On the forensic end, that's, of course, as I explained before, where we do analyses for matters of the law.
Look at my insane
And we
desktop.
receive samples from every state in this country, and we receive samples from out of this country. Most of those samples come from medical examiner laboratories, coroner laboratories, attorneys, and various other sorts of individuals and organizations that need analyses in forensic toxicology.
Okay. And you also do work then for the federal government?
Indeed we do.
And what agencies generally?
Through the years, we've done work for everyone from the FBI to the Veterans Administration to almost all agencies.
Okay, and in fact, it's your lab who did the toxicology on the Anna Nicole Smith case, is not?
And yes, it is.
Okay. And so you do work from all over, international, national, local, regional, whatever?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you said you're Vice President of Quality Assurance, what is quality assurance?
Quality assurance is an overall mechanism that is used in the laboratory industry to make sure that the quality of work that is done within the laboratory is acceptable.
Okay. And as a laboratory director, what are your duties?
That's more of a regulatory position where I interact with regulating bodies, agencies that certify and give us licensure to perform the tests that we do.
Okay. And in your lab, you're also the director of forensic toxicology.
I am.
And that's what we're here to talk about a little bit today. Just with regard to your qualifications, you are what is called a diplomat of the American Board of Forensic Toxicology.
Yes, ma'am.
And what does that mean, diplomat? I know we've all seen it when you're a diplomat of a board, or diplomate of a board.
Well, I like to liken it to physicians. Most people understand they go to a board-certified physician. We have similar board certification in toxicology as well. And in order to attain board certification, you have to be, first of all, practicing in the field for a certain period of time before you can even submit an application for board certification. And once you do submit your application, your credentials are reviewed, and if they are seen to meet what is necessary for the board, they will then allow you to sit for a written examination. And if you pass the examination, you become a diplomate of the board, and then there's a continuing education parameter that has to be met as you continue through your career.
Okay. And you're also a diplomate in the toxicological chemistry, American Board of Clinical Chemistry also, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, she's my favorite field attorney.
Focuses mainly on forensic toxicology. That would be the diplomate of the American Board
crazy.
of Forensic Toxicology. The
Oh, yeah,
American
hold
Board
on.
of Clinical Chemistry and Toxicological Chemistry is both forensic and clinical toxicology.
Okay. And do you have any, or have you had any
what
teaching
I was doing.
appointments in your recent career?
I do.
And what are they, sir?
I am currently an adjunct assistant professor of pharmacology
I did it, but didn't
and
download.
medicine at Thomas Jefferson University and Medical College in Philadelphia. And I also am on the teaching staff of Arcadia University, which is a relatively small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. And are you also on the editorial board of a Journal of Forensic Science magazine?
I am.
And what is that?
That is a group of individuals who are responsible for reviewing articles and overseeing the process of getting articles published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences.
And what is the Journal of Forensic Sciences itself?
That is,
I get caught up.
is the journal, the flagship journal of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, which is the national academy for forensic scientists within this country.
Okay. And you also have been or are an inspector for toxicology labs?
I am.
And
Field
again, in layman's terms, what does that mean that you do?
I'm an inspector for two agencies, the College of American Pathologists as well as the American Board of Forensic Toxicology. Both of those organizations certify laboratories in terms of their practices and their quality, so that to ensure that they're providing a quality service to clients who need it. So I perform inspections, a number of inspections each year for those organizations.
Okay. And Dr. Middlebrooke, before we go on, could you just pull that mic up to you just a little? No, it's the wrong one. That one up there, just a little bit to you, okay? All right, thank you. And along with this regard, you do have obviously a PhD in.
I'm sorry.
You have a PhD?
I'm sorry.
With this, do you have a PhD?
I do.
And what is that in?
Pharmacology.
And what is pharmacology?
Pharmacology is the study of how drugs work.
And how is that different from toxicology?
Toxicology is, in some circles anyway, considered a subset of pharmacology. We like to think of it as its own science. Where I went to school, we only had a department of pharmacology, but my focus in graduate work was toxicology, so the degree is granted in pharmacology.
Okay. And you have a Master's of Science degree in chemistry?
I do.
And a BA in chemistry?
I do.
Now, along with that, you've indicated that you have to do additional training for your diplomate status. You keep training going over the years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you had a lot of additional training of continuing education courses over the past 10 years?
Yes.
I don't want to go through all in your curriculum vitae because there's about 20, but could you tell the jurors maybe one or two of them, for instance?
Well, in general terms, the workshops in continuing education either deal with analytical technologies that we use in the field or interpretive issues in the field and how to interpret concentrations of things we might find. Just things that help us progress as new knowledge is gained through the years.
Okay. And in fact, you've attended actual training courses here in California, have you not?
Yes.
Okay. And are you on any committees for use of toxicologists as a resource?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are one or two of those committees? Again, I don't want to go through your whole CV, but just a few of the committees that you're on.
Well, I sit on the board of directors of the American Board of Forensic Toxicology. I'm also a member of the Toxicology Resource Committee for the College of American Pathologists.
And what is that?
The College of American Pathologists really is a national organization for pathologists in which again, it's a professional organization a pathologist can belong to and keeps them educated and as a professional group. And they will use toxicologists and other individuals who are not pathologists as consultants for various areas of specialty.
Okay. And you've received several honors and awards in your career also, correct?
A few.
And you're on a number of other boards. You're a member of the Society of Forensic Toxicologists.
I belong to a number of professional organizations, including the Society for Forensic Toxicology.
And along with your teaching, lecturing duties, and your active casework in forensic toxicology and pharmacology, you have published articles also, have you not?
Yes, ma'am.
And some of the articles have been what is called peer-reviewed?
That would be correct.
Okay, and what is a peer review?
A peer review is a term we use when we submit articles for publication. If I were to write an article on some piece of research or some finding in our laboratory, I would send it off to an organization that publishes articles, and they would then disseminate it to 1 or 2 or 3 different reviewers who would look at it and critique it for both its scientific content, how it's written, and a number of different aspects. And depending on what the reviews look like, it may or may not be accepted for publication.
Okay, and when you say then it's sent out to
Gotta have that
different
coffee.
people besides people that you work with?
Oh, absolutely.
And why is that important when you are asking to do an article that is peer-reviewed?
Well, certainly if you send it to people that I work with, they're most likely going to approve the article. So it goes out to people who are not with the organization you belong to. It goes out to people all over the country, sometimes outside the country.
Okay. And as a director of your laboratory, you understand how, generally how forensic laboratories then work, forensic toxicology laboratories work?
Yes, ma'am.
By the way, there was some mention of, in this trial previously, of a man named Dr. Basalt. Do you know who he is? A toxicologist.
Yes, I do.
And who is he?
Dr. Basalt is a very well-known forensic toxicologist. Towards the end of his career, the last couple of years, he actually worked for our organization. He has subsequently retired.
And he published one of the books that it's well known in the forensic toxicology community about drugs?
It is a reference book that we use, yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's generally used in the forensic community?
Yes, ma'am.
Toxicology community, okay. Now, having gone through some of your qualifications, a little bit of your qualifications, we don't need to go through too many more. You also actually do and give lectures also?
Yes.
And you've been an invited speaker, what, about 20 or 25 times in the past 5 or 6 years?
I think so, without knowing the exact count, but that sounds about right.
And you have also published articles that are not peer-reviewed also, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, then with regard to your background in forensic toxicology, you were asked to review some records and reports with regard to this matter concerning 2 separate individuals, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the first one would be Phil Spector, right?
Yes.
And the second one was with Miss Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were asked to review several things with regard to Mr. Spector, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, just so you have an idea that there has already been some testimony from Dan Anderson here with regard to the drugs and items that were found in the various specimens that were submitted. So the jury will have some fundamental knowledge when we're talking about that, so we don't have to repeat everything over to go through it, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Now, with regard to, let's talk first about the specimens that you received from, not the specimens, but the reports that you received from Mr. Spector that you were asked to review, okay? You were asked to look at, were you not, the finding of, in the urine of what is called ethanol, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you looked at the report, you saw that there was a finding of .07, is it grams in the urine?
It would be either, well, depends on the units you want to use, 07%.
Okay. And did you also look at concomitant documents that came regarding the collection of that urine from Mr. Spector?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. From the documents you received in discovery produced by the district attorney, were you able to determine when a urine specimen was taken from Mr. Spector?
Yes.
And when was that?
May I refer to my report?
Please, as long as you tell us that you're going to refer to your report so the Your Honor can note it and the prosecutor can note it, okay?
At 6:30 p.m. on February the 3rd, 2003.
Okay. And you received, did you get that from the hospital or forensic nursing records that you reviewed?
Yes.
Okay. And then what was next important to you with regard to where, let me backtrack. What was important to you with regard to how that specimen was collected in terms of your review of the toxicological findings?
At this point, it sounds like counsel is going to ask some questions about previous reports reviewed. I would simply interpose an objection that this is hearsay. If it's not offered for the truth, then I would ask for a limiting instruction, and that'll save me from having to interrupt counsel during the course of the...
Ladies and gentlemen, these reports are what this gentleman is going to base, I assume, certain opinions on, and they're limited to that. And not for the truth of the matter, sort of, but this is what he bases his opinion on. All right, you may proceed.
Judge, there's one matter.
Oh, Freedom Ring, welcome in.
Sidebar, so again, I don't have to interrupt Ms. Kennebach.
Okay.
All right. What was important to you with regard to the collection of the urine that you would take notice of as a forensic toxicologist in order to review these reports and give opinions?
Well, there are always a number of issues that we worry about in terms of specimen collection, whether it be a urine sample, a blood sample, or any sample in a case involving toxicological analysis. In particular, with a urine sample, we worry about the time that passed between a certain event and the time of collection. We worry about how the specimen was collected. We worry about whether an individual voided first or after, or were there any voids in between.
Can I just stop you for a second? Why is it important to look at whether an individual voided first or after or in between?
Well, we often, it gets to the heart of the matter in terms of how we try to interpret urine samples, if at all. In general, forensic toxicologists don't interpret urine values or concentrations in regards to an effect on an individual. And the reason for that is urine is a waste product. We don't look at urine as something that is contemporary with effects on an individual. Blood is generally used for that kind of analysis. Urine, again, is a waste product, and therefore it accumulates over time. And the best way to explain this is that if you were to take an aspirin today, right now, 3 days after today, I would still be able to find aspirin in your urine, even though it's no longer having a pharmacological effect on you. Your headache went away 3 days ago, and yet I can still find remnants of aspirin in your urine. So things just accumulate in your urine over time, so it's very, very difficult for us to interpret what any kind of a finding in urine means.
Okay. And then why is it important to determine whether somebody's voided or not voided before it's taken?
Well, again, because things accumulate in time over urine, sometimes if somebody hasn't voided first, it's really not a fair assessment of what you're getting because they have accumulated a lot of things over time. And it just sits there, and then you collect that. So the proper way oftentimes to collect a urine sample is to let somebody void, wait a period of time, and then collect it again.
Now, in terms of this regard, you did review some paperwork concerning whether or not there could be a determination as to whether Mr. Spector had voided or not voided before this collection was taken, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find?
I found no indication either way whether he had voided first or not voided.
Okay. And is that a problem in doing or looking to see whether or not the urine specimen would be accurate then when you do a testing on it?
Well, certainly it works towards not being able to interpret the urine without that information.
Okay. Was there also something with regard to the tube that the urine was placed in that concerned you?
Yes, the sample was collected in what's known as a purple screw-top tube, a plastic tube.
I'll take 3 of the purple
urine
screw-top
collection tubes do not have
tubes,
preservatives
please.
in them. And we always worry when we're looking for some substances, especially something like ethanol or ethyl
It'd be like that
alcohol,
episode of
whether it
Seinfeld
conform
when
in
they
the
run into the
sample. So the
group of friends
preservatives
that
are
like
generally
look
put
or
in
like
to try to
all of
mitigate
them.
that process to
It's like
keep the
Bizarro
formation
World.
of alcohol from happening.
Okay. And generally, when you get a sample that has a preservative in it, are the tubes standard if you're using instead of a screw top tube, if you use a vacuum tube, are there standard colors to the country so that scientists such as yours knows what's in the tube?
Yes, ma'am.
And what would be the color for a tube that would have a preservative in it?
In general, in terms of alcohol, we talk about tubes that have a gray top stopper.
Okay. And the gray top stopper would have what, sodium fluorides or something in it that would preserve
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
It actually has two components. One is sodium oxalate or some form of oxalate, OXALATE, which is an anticoagulant. You generally use gray top tubes for the most part to collect blood, but you can also put urine in those samples as well. It also contains a substance called sodium fluoride, and fluoride is a bacteriostatic agent that keeps bacteria in check.
And why are you worried when you're looking at a sample that was collected as to whether or not bacteria is in check?
Because bacteria is one of the things that can actually, to lack of a better term, chew on biological materials that may be present to form alcohol.
In other words, if the bacteria is in a non-preserved tube, you could actually have the formation of alcohol in the tube before it's tested, correct?
That's correct. But it's not. We don't just worry about bacteria. We worry about some other things as well.
Like what?
Like yeast, potentially yeast being present. And if yeast is present, the sodium fluoride may or may not have any effect on that.
Okay. And what are some of the conditions that you look for if someone has in records to determine whether or not yeast may be present in a urine sample?
Well, we would have no way of knowing whether yeast is present in a sample unless a particular test is done to check to look for a yeast.
In other words, if you get a sample, let me see if I can summarize this. If you get a sample and you get it and you test it, you would have to see if a particular sample had yeast in it?
Yes.
Okay. And when you looked at the sample that was tested here, that was collected on 6:30 p.m. on 2/3/03, did you see how the specimen, or could you find out how the specimen was either stored from the point of collection until when it was taken out for delivery to the laboratory at the coroner's office?
Actually, in general, with this sample, with the various transfers that occurred, it was hard to follow how the sample was stored.
Okay. And do you know when the County of Los Angeles, when their records indicate that the sample was transferred to the county?
I believe it was actually about 60 hours later on February 6th, 2003.
Okay. Were there any records that you reviewed that indicated that the sample was not preserved properly?
Well, there are some records that indicate that there was no preservative in the tube.
And are those records from or emails or records from the labs or the investigating officers in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you looked at the sample, as far as you were concerned, could you determine whether or not it was preserved properly?
There was no way to tell.
Okay. And you could not determine how it was collected or whether it was collected properly, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's because there was no issue, no determination about whether or not Mr. Spector had voided before it was taken, right?
That was one issue.
Okay. And if he had not voided, that waste collection would have caused possibly a higher reading in his urine, right?
It could.
Okay. Was there something else of interest to you that made you concerned about how to interpret this sample?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that, sir?
In the reports, at least I have two independent pieces of information where a medical condition of diabetes was listed.
Okay. Now, why is that important for you in looking to see whether or not the testing of 0.7 was real or artifactual with regard to this matter?
Individuals with diabetes generally will, we say, dump or pour glucose or sugar into their urine. And the presence of glucose in the concomitant presence of yeast will take glucose and form alcohol. That's the basic process by which we make distilled beverages. Yeast works on sugar to form alcohol, and the same thing can happen in urine.
Okay. And so now you then had three issues that you were looking at: the collection process with regard to the preservative, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The collection process with regard to the lack or non-lack of voiding, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what the formation of yeast may have done in this test tube, correct?
Yes.
And because of those, could you make a determination as to whether or not the .7 that was found in the sample tested by the coroner's office was a real alcohol level or artifactual?
What we can't tell is if any of the value, if all of it, some of it, none of it represents exposure to alcohol.
Now, if you had had a blood alcohol tube or 2 tubes taken a half an hour apart, would you be able to make a determination as to a blood alcohol level that you would be comfortable in?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, again, blood alcohol is the hallmark specimen that we use to try to interpret an individual's exposure to alcohol and what effects it might have.
Okay. And is there a generally accepted procedure in the United States concerning how you do that?
Yes.
And how is it? What is that?
Again, you collect a blood sample in a gray top tube that has both an anticoagulant and a preservative in it. And you generally collect 2 tubes, one that's tested, one that's kept aside in case other testing has to be done. And then you perform testing on those samples.
Okay. And when you looked at the records in this matter with regard to Mr. Spector, did you find any indication that the forensic nurse had taken any blood alcohol samples from Mr. Spector?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did you find any indication in any of the records you looked at that any blood alcohol was taken from Mr. Spector?
No, ma'am.
Now, even though you had a urine that you felt that was unacceptable to make a determination as to whether it was real or artifactual in any regard, if there had been a urine sample that you would have confidence in, is there an accepted method to relate urine to a blood alcohol concentration?
No, there is not.
And could you explain that a little more to the juries, please?
Well, as I explained earlier, again, urine is a waste product. And the further you go out from the point of some event to the time of collection, the less confidence you have in terms of how you can even state with some certainty that an individual was exposed to something or when they were exposed. In this case, I think we went out about 12 to 13 hours after a particular event that before a sample was collected. And then we really start to lose some confidence in how to even look at that result and what to do with it.
Okay. So even if this was a urine sample that in your opinion you felt was valid in the first place, you would have problem relating it back to what any alcohol level was at any particular time in the blood, correct?
Well, we generally wouldn't do that anyway, take a urine value and then try to connect it to a blood value.
Because that's not scientifically acceptable, is that your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there something called speculative analysis with regard to urine samples or prospective analysis with regard to urine samples?
Yes, we call it
Yeah, we have another Brooklyn
analysis.
in here.
What is that?
May still have a Brooklyn in here.
That is where we
double Brooklyn
attempt to make a blood alcohol determination based on drinking history, drinking information that's provided to us.
Okay. And is blood alcohol from a specific test tube important in making that determination?
Yes.
Can you do it from urine?
Again, we generally will not interpret urine samples in terms of a blood alcohol.
If you had had the appropriate 2 blood alcohol samples, would we be able to sit here today and make that determination for this jury?
Well, if you had a blood alcohol determination, you wouldn't have to do a prospective study because you'd have a blood alcohol determination.
Okay. But you don't have that?
No, ma'am.
Now, with regard to the urine, you couldn't tell us one way or another because you couldn't even tell whether it was real or not. There were drugs that were tested for in regard to the urine in that same sample.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, why is the testing of drugs in a urine sample, or is the testing of drugs in a urine sample different from the testing for ETOH or alcohol in a urine sample?
It is different. Again, alcohol won't stay in urine quite as long as some drugs. However, the finding of a drug, a particular drug substance in urine, is a little different in that we don't know of any organisms that are likely to form drugs, most drugs. So when you find something, it generally indicates that an individual was exposed to something.
Okay, so unlike the urine, correct me if I'm wrong, with regard to alcohol, you have the issue of the collection procedure, the voiding, you have the issue of the storage, and you have the issue of the diabetes that affects your making a determination on whether or not it's a real sample or not, or whether or not it's a real analysis or not, right?
Yes.
But with blood, without urine and drugs, you don't have that.
Typically not.
Okay. Now, knowing that, then are you more comfortable then looking at the toxicological analysis with regard to the drugs and the drug byproducts that were found in Mr. Spector's urine? And the drug byproducts that were found? Byproducts that were found in Mr. Spector's urine?
Yes.
Right. And what were the drugs or byproducts of those drugs that were found in the urine?
There were 3 other substances reported. Fluoxetine, Fluoxetine.
Which is what? Does that have a common name?
It does.
And that is what?
More commonly known brand name is Prozac.
Okay, that's number 1.
The second one was norfluoxetine, Norfluoxetine, and that is a metabolite or breakdown product. Once the parent compound fluoxetine gets in the body, it's what the body converts fluoxetine to, so that you can eliminate it faster.
Okay, that was 2.
And the third was topiramate, Topirmate. And the brand name of that is Topamax.
And what is Topamax or topiramate?
That is a drug that's generally used for seizure control. It can also be used for some off-label things, such as control of pain and a few other things as well.
Okay. And while you were outside, Mr. Anderson, as I indicated to you, was here, and he also mentioned the drug Neurontin, which may have been found in some of their earlier tests, but not indicated in their final test. What is Neurontin?
Neurontin is, the generic name is gabapentin, Gabapentin, and it too is used in the control of seizure activity, but can also be used off-label for such things as pain control.
Okay. Does the fact that you found a byproduct of the drug Prozac mean anything toxicologically to you?
It just means that this individual was exposed to fluoxetine probably within 3 to 4 days of the collection of the sample.
And that's because it had enough time to make a byproduct?
Well, it's in the urine, whether the byproduct's there or not, but of course the byproduct helps. It's just that we know that it takes about 3 or 4 days before you completely eliminate a dose of a compound like this.
Okay. Now, fluoxetine, am I pronouncing that right? Fluoxetine?
Yes, ma'am.
And topiramate are associated with some adverse side effects when used, are they not?
Well,
adverse effects, not adverse side effects, when used therapeutically.
Fluoxetine, topiramate, and gabapentin are, yes, ma'am.
And what is one of those side effects that you noted for us, sir?
One of them is tremor.
And are all 3 drugs, is Prozac associated with tremor?
Yes, ma'am.
Topiramate associated with tremor?
Not to the same degree, but yes.
Okay, and the third drug was associated with tremor?
Gabapentin is definitely associated with tremor.
Okay, and when you say tremor, what do you mean?
I guess the best way is to show. It's what we would normally, a layperson would normally call as shakes.
And just for the record, you lifted your right hand and kind of shook it.
And shook my right hand, yes, ma'am.
And are, based on the pharmacological effects of those drugs, is tremor something that is controllable? In other words, I can stop my tremor if I say stop?
No.
Why is that?
Because it's not a voluntary tremor. It's an involuntary tremor. It's something that is being mediated within the body, not something that somebody is purposely doing.
Okay. And when you said that the 3 drugs are associated with tremor, are some associated more than others?
Yes, the fluoxetine and the gabapentin.
And that would be the Prozac and the Neurontin on the trade names?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, does the tremor on the 3 drugs generally known to have a synergistic effect?
That's hard to say, but as a pharmacologist, certainly when you have more than one substance capable of causing an effect, you kind of worry whether there's going to be at least an additive effect with those substances.
Are any of those drugs associated with incoordination?
They can.
Just saw the fajitas. Thank you, Shelley. I was caught up in something I didn't know. You know those things that like they're always finding like weird things in the the old Disney things, like some kind of sexual innuendos or something. Hold on, let me get rid of this. This. It took me a second to actually like see it though. Like they have it called out. A topless woman appears briefly in the background of a scene in The Rescuers because a single frame with the image was accidentally inserted, causing Disney to later recall VHS copies of the film due to inappropriate content. So here's the picture. But then you can kind of go through it yourself. And I was doing it like frame by frame. Laserdisc recall. I couldn't, like, here it is right there, actually. Yeah, look at that. This is the 1999 one. Like, that's telling me coming down all these buildings and all of a sudden, topless lady. But then they show the 2012 Blu-ray, and if you go through this one, they've cut it out. Somebody got sneaky. Then they do them side by side. Look at that. I feel like that's crazy.
Can be.
Okay. Any other effects besides the tremor that is important for this jury to hear about pharmacologically or toxicologically?
These compounds can cause somnolence or sleepiness and dizziness and other central nervous system depressant type effects.
Okay. Now, in 2003, did your lab have the ability, if had been requested, to do a test for a drug with the street name Viagra?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that test did exist for certain labs back in 2003, correct?
Oh, you seen boobs, didn't even know it.
And as far as you know, was your lab the only lab in the country that did it, or was it a pretty common practice for other labs that you reviewed as you were going around the country in your capacity as an inspector?
I'm not sure how many labs had that capacity. Certainly we had that capacity, and I know a few others did because there were published articles on it. So I really can't quantify how many labs had that capability.
And your lab back in 2003 has been asked, not necessarily in this case, but other governmental agencies to do governmental work independently on certain drugs to see if they exist in specimens, correct?
Every day.
Okay. You're not exclusive to defense, is what I'm saying.
Actually, it kind of goes the other way.
Okay. Now, thank you. That was with regard to Mr. Spector. I'd like to, by the way, just before we get off that, in terms of your scientific certainty, scientifically it's pretty certain then, in your opinion, that the 3 items, the 3 drugs that you found, fluoxetine, norfloxacin, and topiramate were in the urine sample, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But is it scientifically possible to say that there was true ETOH or ethanol in that urine sample?
No.
Now, if we can move, Dr. Middleberg, briefly over to the other reports that you reviewed for us, that being dealing with the decedent Lana Clarkson. Again, Mr. Anderson was here, so the jury does have some working knowledge already about what was found, okay? Just so you know. All right. Now, you did review the reports, and do you concur with Mr. Anderson concerning the finding of hydrocodone and ethanol in the blood here, the blood that was submitted of Lana Clarkson?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you're talking about the reports from Ms. Clarkson, you had both reports that dealt with blood and urine to look at, correct?
Yes, as well as another substance too.
And bile?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is bile?
Bile is a material that's contained within your gallbladder. It's a green liquid and contained in the only green organ in your body, the gallbladder. It's made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder for release into your small intestines. And in terms of the elimination of substances from your body, it's a number of different kinds of compounds, both foreign substances and normal things that happen in your body will be stored in bile and then eliminated through your small intestine and your large intestine and certainly in your fecal matter.
So why pharmacologically or toxicologically do you look at bile to determine whether there may be drugs in the bile?
Certain things accumulate in bile, and they will stay in bile longer than other places. One of the well-known substances that accumulates in bile are opiates. Opiates include things such as morphine, and hydrocodone is one as well, in fact, and a number of other opiate-type compounds.
And since you started with the hydrocodone, there was hydrocodone here, which is also commonly known as Vicodin.
It's in a lot of different products, both name brands as well as generic brands.
Okay. And in the bile of Ms. Clarkson, there was how much, what were the level or units found?
Again, if I may refer to my report?
Yes.
In femoral blood, there was 0.07 micrograms per milliliter.
Now, what does that mean in terms of, like, you can explain that in terms of a layperson?
Micro sounds very small, but for us, when you take something into your body, if you think about it, if you take, say, one Tylenol, and it's one little tablet, you put it into your body, it's going to get dissolved all through your body. So that one little tablet, you have 5 liters of blood approximately in your body. You've got a liver, you've got brains and muscles and tissues and bones. So it's going to go everywhere. So then when we talk about units like micrograms, while the name might sound small, that's what we normally expect to find for compounds like this. They get disseminated, so we find very little. But the units that we use are micrograms. That's the amount of the substance per milliliter of blood.
Okay. And so I interrupted you when you were on the opiate in the blood. And what was the finding there?
Again, once again, 0.07 micrograms per milliliter.
And that was in the femoral blood?
Yes, ma'am.
Why do you use, as a toxicologist, the femoral blood?
Well, we generally talk about collecting blood from a few different sources in the body, especially post-mortem. One is the heart. One is what we call a peripheral site, of which the femoral blood would be one. The femoral arteries and veins are found in your legs, and they're distant from your heart. Something happens post-mortem. There's a phenomenon called post-mortem redistribution that we know happens with some substances. You can't predict if it's going to happen. You don't know if it happened in any particular case, except if you do what they did in this laboratory, which was good experimental work, where they measured compounds in both femoral blood and heart blood. But this post-mortem redistribution phenomenon can lead to artificially elevated concentrations of substances in certain sites throughout the blood, throughout the body. Heart blood is one of the samples that we worry to a fair degree that that's going to happen. And again, we can't predict if it's going to happen in any given case. We don't even fully understand all the mechanisms that lead to it, but we do know that over time and given certain situations, materials, some substances, some drugs will leach out of some organs and other vessels and pool in the heart. So you might get a higher concentration. In this case, they looked at both heart blood and femoral blood, and the concentrations were actually the same. So that leads us to believe there probably was not redistribution in this case.
Okay. And that means 0.1, even though one was 0.12 and one was 0.14?
Well, that's for the ethyl alcohol, not
I'm sorry.
hydrocodone.
I apologize. I'm sorry, the heart blood in terms of the hydrocodone.
Yes, ma'am.
So you know there was no redistribution. It was pretty accurate.
Doesn't appear to be.
Okay. Now, with regard to the femoral blood concentration of the hydrocodone, could you determine anything regarding the concentration and the dosage level?
Well, certainly it's hard to backtrack a concentration to a dose, a particular dose. We can only do it in relative terms. Say, well, this may sound not great. We say, is there a little bit there, is a lot there, or is there really a lot there? And I know people would like it to be a little more exacting than that, but it's difficult often for us to do that. In this case, we look at the concentration. It's a little bit elevated compared to what we would normally find, say, after a single dose of hydrocodone.
Okay. And you also had the bile, which indicated that it had processed and had been there for a term of usage or a term of time.
Well, if you find hydrocodone in bile, it means it had time to accumulate there.
And that would that support your level that it was just a little bit elevated than in the femoral blood?
Yeah, it's hard to interpret a bile concentration.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Now, with regard to hydrocodone, is it a narcotic drug?
It is.
And what schedule in the DEA is it on?
It is a Schedule 3 controlled substance.
Okay. And does it have any pharmacological effects or side effects on the central nervous system?
Yes, it does.
And what are those effects that are known to people such as yourself in this community?
The side effects of hydrocodone, which again belongs in the opioid family, are CNS depressant related.
And CNS means what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Central nervous system, which includes, for all practicality, it's the brain and the spinal cord.
Sheila, thanks for hanging this
morning. We really
morning.
just focus on the brain.
Okay. And what are some of those effects that are known in your community?
They include, again, somnolence or tiredness, dizziness, perhaps, sedation, overall sedation, lethargy, just not moving quickly, sleepiness, making people sleep.
On that note, we're going to take
I was like, I need a break.
our recess. Keep in mind the admonition, 15 minutes. Thank you.
We got about halfway through this thing.
Court's in session. All right, all parties are present as heretofore, jurors, alternates, and the witness as well. You may proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Middleberg, when we left, you were discussing some of the effects of the central nervous system depressant of hydrocodone, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you were imparting to the jury some of those effects, and we left, I think, at the sleepiness part. And now they're wide awake, so can we go on? Thank you.
Other effects that are centrally mediated through the brain in terms of depression include such things as impaired judgment, impaired coordination, and a general impairment of sense of care and caution.
Okay. Now, you also looked at the toxicology, and there was a non-prescription medication, a common over-the-counter one called Benadryl that was found.
Yes, ma'am.
And actually, I used the trade name, but what is the product name that was in the sample?
It's called diphenhydramine, diphenhydramine.
Is that a central nervous system depressant?
It is.
Killing
Okay. And what are some of the effects of that?
Don't invite
Again,
Robert
there would be the
Middleberg to your
sleepiness, there would be tiredness
spelling bee.
in dose-dependent fashion.
It's gonna kill
It could be the same leading up to impaired judgment, coordination, sense of care and caution, similar effects.
Okay. And then you also noted that, and we talked a little bit about the blood alcohol level of, in passing, of ETOH or ethanol.
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that was found?
0.12 gram percent.
What does that mean?
We, as toxicologists, would use units 120 milligrams per deciliter. To put it in terms of driving, it used to be in most states, that 0.1 was an impairment level in terms of driving. Most states have lowered it at this point. I'm not sure if California has, but in most states it's a 0.08. And 120 milligrams per deciliter, or 0.12%, is certainly a high enough blood alcohol concentration to elicit central nervous system depressant effects. Again, the impaired alertness, coordination, judgment, sense of care and caution, those kinds of effects are pretty typical with a blood alcohol of a 0.12%. In some individuals, depending on their drinking habits, they might be what we call frankly intoxicated, which is the commonly drunk, the bloodshot eyes and the slurred speech, things like that.
Is there something else besides frank intoxication at a different spectrum pharmacologically?
Yes, you can be impaired certainly by alcohol without being frankly intoxicated. In fact, most people are when they drink. They become intoxicated without becoming commonly drunk.
Now, the depressant effects of the three central nervous system depressants that you mentioned, are they individual, or do they have a cumulative or synergistic effect?
What we like to say is that they have an at least additive effect to one another. In other words, we can't quantify whether it's 10 times or 5 times, but we know it's at least additive when you add central nervous system depressants together. And in this case, we have the alcohol and the hydrocodone, and you have the diphenhydramine, and all three of them central nervous system depressants, and you would expect their CNS or central nervous system depressant effects to be at least additive.
Okay. And as a toxicologist in your years of experience, have you had the occasion to look at blood samples, urine samples, or whatever in making a determination as to whether or not there's alcohol or central nervous system depressant drugs present in cases where there's an issue of whether a wound was self-inflicted or not?
Many, many times.
That's very, as stated, it's vague to me.
Do you understand the question, sir?
Yes, sir.
You may answer.
Many times.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt, Doctor. It also lacks foundation and calls for speculation as phrased.
That's sustained. You'll have to lay a foundation.
Have you, excuse me, have you been given samples to look at where, for instance, the investigating agency has come to you and said, we have determined this is a self-inflicted wound. Could you tell us if alcohol and drugs are present?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. May we approach?
We're going to need you to approach.
Thank you.
Doctor, going back to the sample that you reviewed in terms of the coroner's office with regard to the various items in the sample, there was one area that we still had not touched on, and was there a but let me just talk about the sample. Did you review certain documents regarding whether or not there was one capsule found in the purse of Lana Clarkson that had a Zenith 4266 on it?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the
Always
name of
bring it
that
through the
drug?
knowledge. Brooklyn, I love it.
The generic name for that compound is acyclovir, ACYCLOVIR.
Okay, and as a pharmacologist, toxicologist, are there certain side effects of ingestion of that drug that is known in the community that you work in?
There can be.
Okay, and what are some of the side effects that you note?
Some of the side effects associated with that compound, and it varies from person to person, might include blood-related disorders.
And what are the effects known on acyclovir for the blood-related disorders?
One of them is called thrombocytopenia, THROMBOCYTOPENIA.
And what does that mean?
It's you have too few platelets, and platelets are responsible for clotting when you get injured or you get a cut. The platelets are part of the process that helps the bleeding stop.
Okay. And does that relate in any way to a side effect dealing with bruising or bleeding?
It can.
And can it relate to spontaneous bruising?
It depends how you define spontaneous, but certainly people with that condition can bruise easily.
Okay, and when you say easily, what do you mean in a pharmacological way?
contact, slight contact.
Slight contact, did you say?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, doctor. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Very briefly, Your Honor, one of the things, Doctor, that you indicated about Your Honor, I hate to do this. There's an issue before I broach the subject that I think I'd like some guidance from the court on, and I'd like to talk to counsel about.
Okay.
Very briefly.
You want to talk to them or you want to come to the bench?
The bench.
All right.
Hey, we got Alan Jackson sighting this morning, my God. The ladies in the chat are going nuts.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Middleburg, one of the questions Ms. Kenny Bodden posed to you was whether or not a blood test would have been something that may have been helpful to you or may have been an accurate determination.
My Lord, I caught this one early. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. Yeah, anytime I get some fajitas, if you have the emojis packet and you're a member here in the Murder Church, let me know about it. Right here. The fajitas.
In time to the event of
the coolest emojis we got.
Blood alcohol content of Mr. Spector, correct?
Sizzling.
Okay. You know what a breathalyzer test is as well, correct?
I do.
All right. And breathalyzer tests can be accurate determinations, maybe not quite as accurate as a blood test, but pretty accurate determination of blood alcohol content as well if they're properly administered, correct?
It does a pretty good job.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
With regard to the voiding, you indicated that you did review a lot of these reports and notes, a lot of the police reports, notes that were associated with the police reports, certain medical documentation, including the autopsy report, toxicology reports, etc. You're waiting for me to stumble on that, weren't you? I've done it enough times. Did you also review the certain reports by a nurse that actually took the urine sample?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In that report, and you indicated to Ms. Kenny Bodden that you didn't see any indication of a void, correct? You just said that it's kind of out there hanging, and I just didn't see it one way or the other, correct?
Not that I recall, yes, sir.
Okay. Doctor, do you recall seeing an area on, in counsel, I'm referring to Bates page 290. Do you let's start that over. It's getting late in the afternoon. Do you recall referring to a forensic medical report done by Nurse Carrie Caruso, specifically
Damn outside. That does not sound
subsection
fun.
D as in dog, that's denoted recent hygiene information? Do you recall seeing that? If you don't, that's fine. I'm just doing a foundational thing. I'm not taxing your memory.
No, sir. I looked at a lot of documents.
I figured you did. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
This is just possibly one of many, many documents that you reviewed. Take a glance at that and tell me if you recognize that.
Yes, well, yes, I do now.
Okay, you have seen that in the past.
I believe so.
All right, and take a look at the highlighted portion if you wouldn't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me go ahead and take that back from you and ask you, do you recall reading in that report an indication that under recent hygiene information, when that information was taken from Mr. Spector at or around the time of the urine sample, that under the label urinated, in other words, urinated question mark, it's marked yes?
Yes, it does.
Okay, that would indicate if in fact Mr. Spector urinated before he gave the sample, that would be consistent with a void of the bladder, correct?
If that's what that means, or if, I'm not sure if that refers to the actual void itself, or if that refers to a prior void, I'm not sure.
Okay, and that's under something, that's not under the a portion that's called sample, it's under a portion called recent hygiene information, correct?
Yes, sir.
And included in that is urinated, defecated, oral or gargle or rinse and genital wipes, things like that, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So there's nothing to suggest that that is actually the urine sample itself. That would seem to suggest to you, the way that's written, that it's talking about recent hygiene information coming up to the point at which the examination is taken, correct?
Again, I'm not sure if that, I can't interpret it as it's checked.
Okay, but you will agree with me on your review of this report that it is checked, recently urinated, correct?
Yes, sir.
And for instance, recently defecated, the check mark is no.
Yes, sir.
All right. If in fact that's what that means, and there is a indication that he had recently urinated, there's nothing magical about a void. I mean, that's something in scientific terms that just means to use the restroom, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go number one, right?
Yes.
How about empty your bladder?
Okay.
Just to elevate it slightly.
We can go there.
All right, thank you.
That's fine. All right, Dr. Middleburg, just a couple of more questions, and then I'm going to sit down real quick. CNS depressant, you indicated that on your review of Ms. Clarkson's toxicological analysis.
Oh,
you
God, I
noted
can imagine.
that
It's like
she
a
had,
long movie, right? Like an
an
intricate
alcohol
film.
level, a particular alcohol
You're gonna
level
miss
of
something.
0.12, correct?
So much.
Yes,
It's
sir.
hard
She
to
also
continuously
indicated,
pay
you
attention.
also indicated that you reviewed
I go off with
documentation
little
that
huts on
suggested
the
that she had
side.
hydrocodone
Sometimes we get
in
a
her
little
system as
lost.
well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Hydrocodone,
What's
as
it
you
going though,
explained to
man?
this
I like
jury,
this
is
one.
a CNS
Incredibly
depressant or a
interesting.
central nervous system depressant, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, I want to make sure we don't mix up our terminology. In your world of science, doctor, a CNS depressant, even though it's from the root word depress, you're not talking about an emotional state of being depression, correct?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay, that's completely different. That's not what you're suggesting, correct?
No, not at all.
Okay. What you're talking about is the central nervous system, whatever that is in our body, that somehow being depressed in scientific terms, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That CNS depressant, or that, let me rephrase that effect of the alcohol as well as a CNS depressant in the system can have certain side effects. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you've gone through the litany of some of those side effects with Ms. Kinney Bodden. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but I want to change. No, I don't want to change gears. I'm going to go ahead and finish that train of thought before I lose it. One of the things that you indicated was in a CNS depressant that there may be tiredness, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you called that somnolence?
Yes.
Dizziness?
Yes, sir.
Lethargy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And certain impairments of judgment may exist, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you're not saying that, in your expert opinion, Lana Clarkson suffered any or all of these. You're simply saying from a scientific standpoint, these are some of the side effects that can happen, correct?
Yes.
All right. You're not saying that Lana Clarkson did suffer any or all of these, are you?
No, sir.
All right. As a matter of fact, isn't it true that in this field of science, the absolute best way to determine how a CNS depressant or alcohol or the combination of the two affects a human being is to look at how it's affected them in the past? In other words, what is their history of effect on that particular person, correct?
That's one element. We also, just based on the pharmacological nature of the compounds, can reach opinions as well.
I understand, but you're talking about, from a pharmacological standpoint alone, you're talking about a universe of possible side effects in a particular human being, correct?
Sure.
All right. So in other words, doctor, let me use an example of you and me. Let's say we both had hydrocodone in our system and we both had alcohol in our system, and it was about the same amounts for both of us relative to our size, okay?
Yes, sir.
You might, if I understand you correctly, you might suffer somnolence or lethargy, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I might suffer something different, euphoria or something completely different, correct? Based on how the chemicals are working and reacting with my body, correct?
It's possible.
Okay. The best way, as a matter of fact, it's been written in the literature that the best way to make a determination of how somebody is going to react personally to a particular stimulant, be it a CNS depressant or alcohol or uppers or downers or whatever, the best way to make that determination as accurately as possible is to look at historically how those chemicals have affected that particular person individually.
I would disagree. The best way to judge how substances work on or effects they're having on an individual is actually to give it to the individual in a certain particular circumstance and see how they respond. A lot of responses to pharmacological agents are situationally dependent. How an individual responds in one situation, given one set of circumstances and situations when they have something in them may be different than how they respond given a different set of circumstances.
That's a great point. So what you're saying is if the set of circumstances tends to be relatively consistent, you could expect a relatively consistent reaction from that individual to the stimulants that they're on, correct?
Again, the way I explain this to students and to budding people is that each time you take these medications, any medication, whether it be an aspirin or a depressant, it's an experiment. And you can't really predict what's going to happen, and that's part of the risk-benefit of taking medication. We like to think pills are safe and they're not going to affect us, but you really don't know from time to time. So it is hard to predict. I don't think I'd want to reach the conclusion that you've made.
All right. Isn't it true that it's been written in the literature that, in fact, there's no way to say how an individual specifically will react by, for instance, let's use an example of blood alcohol alone, correct?
It is, again, we talk in generalities. That is correct.
All right. And you're aware of the literature also saying that the best indication of reaction would be an account of how that person has reacted in the past, in past times when previously intoxicated.
Certainly with alcohol, we say, the phrase we like to use is if someone drinks and they're a passive drunk, so to speak, they'll generally always be a passive drunk. If they're an aggressive drunk, they'll generally always be an aggressive drunk.
All right. You also indicated that Mr. Spector had CNS depressants in his system.
Yes, sir.
And that would be in the form of, I think you said the Prozac, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were there any other of the medications that you listed that were found in Mr. Spector's system, were there any other of those that you would list as a CNS depressant?
Yes, the topiramate.
Okay, which is commonly referred to as Topamax.
Yes.
And based on the information that you have, you also reviewed reports that showed that there was alcohol found in his urine, correct?
There was a determination of alcohol in his urine.
All right, and I understand you've already explained to Ms. Kinney Bodden.
You guys want to see a picture of me 11 years ago when I was 27 and I look exactly the same? I've literally looked like this since 2005 and I don't think that I'm ever going to look any different. I'm a vampire. Right? Like, what the fuck? What the hell's going on?
That you're not sitting up there trying to extrapolate backward and tell us what his BAC was at a particular time, but in fact, the scientific analysis that was done, the toxicological analysis that was done, did show alcohol in his urine, correct?
I would agree that the analysis showed alcohol. It's just hard to determine whether the alcohol is, what the source of the alcohol is.
All right, and certainly you're not saying one way or the other. You're just saying you can't tell, but in fact there was alcohol there, ETOH.
There is no independent scientific evidence to support either way. That's correct.
Okay. To support either way how it got there, but you're having no scientific quarrel with the idea that ETOH was found analytically in the urine sample.
That's correct.
Okay. If the nature of how you said generally just a second ago in an answer to another question concerning alcohol specifically, you said generally if someone's an aggressive drunk, they're always going to be an aggressive drunk, and if someone has a history of being a passive drunk, they're generally always going to be a passive drunk, correct?
Within boundaries.
I understand. I mean, you're not saying that it's a scientific determination that if, 2 shots of alcohol and you're absolutely going to act this way every single time. That's not what you're saying.
No, sir.
But broad generalizations based on your pharmacological background, that you can say what you just said a second ago, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So if I hear you correctly, if someone has a history with the substance of being, for instance, gregarious, demonstrative, happy, you would expect them pretty consistently to be gregarious, demonstrative, and happy.
Again, within boundaries, yes.
If someone else, for instance, has a history on this substance of being violent and hostile and angry, you would expect them generally to become violent and hostile and angry, using that same generalization that you just talked about, pharmacologically speaking.
Again, within boundaries.
All right. You talked for, and this is the second area I want to cover, and I think I can finish up pretty quickly. And I know we're trying to get you out of here. I'm trying to accommodate you, Doctor.
I appreciate that.
You talked about something called perspective analysis. Ms. Kinney Bodden asked you a series of very specific questions about Mr. Spector's urine sample and the ETOH finding, or we've used the phrase ETOH, the alcohol finding in his urine sample. She asked you about glucose and the concomitant presence of yeast, and you talked about certain bacteria that may have existed and certain preservatives that you're not sure were there, and lack of preservatives that may or may not have been there in the proper tube, and maybe it wasn't the proper tube, etc. Instead of talking about, or instead of explaining glucose and the presence of yeast and the presence of bacteria in an unpreserved urine sample, let me ask you a much more simple question, pharmacologically speaking. Would you expect someone, assume for purposes of my question the following facts. Okay, let's do it this way. I think it'll be a little cleaner and easier. Assume for purposes of this next question the following facts. Somewhere between 7:30 and 10 o'clock at night, a person had a daiquiri. And assume when I use a common name, a pronoun for a particular bit of alcohol, just assume that it's got a shot of alcohol in it, unless I tell you differently. Absolutely, absolutely, Doctor. Assume that someone had a daiquiri between 7:30 and 10 at night. Assume that...
Oh, wait. Fajitas, damn son. What's going on with the fajitas this morning? I think sometimes the phone thing is inside this feed.
That same person consumed 2
I hear it
what's called
sometimes, too.
Navy grogs,
I usually don't hear, like,
each
the
of
fajita
which
feed.
contain 3
I
shots
could be
or
wrong.
3 ounces
I don't...
of alcohol. And that was between 11 and 12. Assume next that that same person had 2 more drinks between 12 and 1, be those amaretto sours or daiquiris or something like that, each containing 1 shot of alcohol.
Between what hours, sir?
Between 12 and 1 a.m. And then assume that that person at around 2 a.m. had a shot of Bacardi 151, and assume for purposes of my question that that 151 does in fact have about 150 proof as opposed to the normal 80 proof or so. Instead of talking about bacteria and yeast and all that stuff, I just want to ask you simply, would you expect, pharmacologically, would you expect a person who consumed that amount of alcohol at around 4 o'clock in the morning, going into 5 o'clock in the morning, to be intoxicated in any way, shape, form, or fashion?
That's a very difficult question to answer, whether they'd be intoxicated.
Okay. Let me add a little fact to that hypothetical, because maybe it's a little bit incomplete. Let's assume that person is male. Let's assume that person weighs 135 pounds or so. And let's also assume that the person ate throughout the course of the evening, early on in the evening, between, say, 7 and 9. And I'm not asking you to give me a specific BAC. That's not what I'm asking, Doctor. I'm asking you very simply, based on that drinking pattern, at around 4 or 5 in the morning, say between the hours of 4 and 5 in the morning, would you expect that person to be in any way intoxicated?
Again, I don't think one can answer yes or no. There are a lot of factors that would play into that.
So you believe, based on your testimony?
Have you finished your answer?
No.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and finish.
Please.
When you talk about a drinking history like that, part of the problem with the prospective analysis is that we don't know how fast the drinks were consumed. We don't know if somebody drank them all within 5 minutes or sipped it over an hour. And the reason why that's important is that it is physically possible to sip a drink over the course of an hour or so that you really don't even get an increase in your blood alcohol concentration because you could sip it slow enough so that your body can break it down as you're drinking it. So there are a number of factors, including rapidity of drinking, the individual, him or herself, how they.
I'm sober enough to know what I'm doing, and I'm drunk enough to really enjoy doing it.
Yep.
Absorb alcohol, potential pathological conditions with the individual, food intake, and a number of other issues that work towards us trying to come up with an accurate determination of what the blood alcohol concentration would have been at some prior point in time. We have to deal with an individual's metabolic rate. Some people metabolize slow, some people metabolize fast. So coming up with an accurate number is difficult. That's just the analytical or mathematical perspective of it. But then you also have to deal, when you talk about intoxication, about how an individual handles the alcohol, what their constitution is, how common of a drinker they are, how they handle it, how they respond, and things like that. So besides the analytical issues, we have the pharmacological issues, and both of those, to just give a general answer to your question, make it difficult to determine just on a scenario like that whether somebody would be intoxicated at some point in time.
All right, let's not suspend reality and assume that this person in my hypothetical is just barely sipping any alcohol.
Objection, argument, assuming reality, suspending reality.
The prelude to your question, if you can change it kindly,
Sure.
objection is sustained.
Sure. I don't want to... let's assume for purposes of my question that there's normal, natural drinking going on, a social drinking going on, whatever that means. And I don't know if that's 10 sips every 15 minutes or if that, I just want to get it down to some common sense. Normal drinking pattern throughout the evening based on this drinking pattern, all right, this amount of alcohol ordered and consumed, and assume that the person continued to drink, and let's just say maybe one drink after 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so we've come up to the Bacardi 151 being consumed about 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's add tequila, and let's just say one shot of tequila at around 3 o'clock in the morning. And let's assume an average drinking pattern, and let's assume an average metabolic rate, okay? For whatever that means. I'm not asking you what the BAC of the person is, and I'm not asking you to backwards extrapolate. I'm asking, based on that drinking pattern and that amount of alcohol in a 135-pound male, would you expect that person to feel the effects of alcohol, to be under the influence in any way?
Again, you'd have to do the individual experiment with that individual. I mean, I could give you an example, if you'd like, where something like that falls flat. I participated in a conference for attorneys where I was asked to act as an expert. And it involved an actual case, a real case, where there was an individual in the state of Texas who was pulled over, I guess, for DUI. And in Texas, they have
get in here. Welcome in.
A rule where they have to film the field sobriety tests on the side of the road. So they filmed them, and the individual actually passed his field sobriety tests. And then he was brought back to the station, the police station, to give a breath test. But before that, he was filmed again doing his field sobriety tests. And he passed those too. But he breathed anyway into the breath machine, and I believe the concentration that registered on the machine was about a 0.2 or 0.22 up to a 0.25. And this individual passed his field sobriety tests and yet was blowing what appeared to be a high alcohol concentration. So when you look at things like that, it's often hard to try to delineate whether any particular individual will show signs of intoxication, even with a drinking history.
Assume that this person in my hypothetical is not that exceptional circumstance. And where was that, by the way?
In Texas.
That's an inside joke, Doc. Assume that this is not that exceptional person in Texas who can drink a hell of a lot of alcohol and apparently passes FSTs. Assume that this person actually did show signs of inebriation, and those outward signs included an odor of alcohol, slurred speech, and an unsteady gait. Now, given all those parameters, could you say pharmacologically that that is consistent with someone, that drinking pattern and those outward signs is consistent with someone being under the influence somewhere around 4 to 5 in the morning?
If you combine a drinking history along with observed signs and symptoms, then it becomes a little stronger. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doctor.
Redirect.
Doctor, did you also review an EMS report of Phil Spector at about, examined by EMS people about 6:20 in the morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Along with Mr. Jackson's questions of you, was there anything important in that for you in terms of pharmacology in order to look at whether or not the sample, the urine sample, was valid or invalid?
Well, the EMS report wouldn't help in terms of whether the sample itself was valid. I mean, the EMS people had nothing to do with the collection of the sample.
Did it help pharmacology to determine whether or not Mr. Spector elicited signs of intoxication?
Yes, ma'am.
And why?
I believe somewhere approximately in the 6 to 6:30 range, EMS, emergency medical staff, evaluated, at least as they write on their report, an individual named Phil Spector. And besides writing diabetes on the report, they also write a few other things. And they assessed him a few ways. One of them was by what's known as a Glasgow GLAS GOW coma score, of which he got the highest number, which is an indication of an individual's alertness, their ability to follow directions, and how they're working mentally, their mentation. Also, they have on here A/O times 4, which is alert and oriented times 4, which is the highest number you can get. And there's also a box that says ethanol drug suspected, and it was not checked off.
And as a scientist, do you place more judgment in scientific tests or things that you see, such as EMS reports, or in something called that prospective or hypothetical analysis?
We tend to put a fair amount of emphasis on independent medical evaluations.
Okay. And did you see anything scientifically in what you reviewed at all on the scientific side which would indicate to you that Philip Spector was frankly intoxicated, or what you call drunk, on February 3rd, 2003 at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Objection. That would call for speculation. Based on the way it's phrased.
Sustained. I don't think that you can offer it. It leaves too many things out.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you discussed with Mr. Jackson on the cross-examination was the voiding. Remember that? You went back to the voiding issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in a collection of a sample for urinalysis, voiding has a very specific meaning, does it not?
Yes.
Okay. And voiding generally means that you do a first void, then you stop and wait 20 minutes, and you do a second void right there in order to take the test, correct?
You wait some period of time, yes, ma'am.
Okay. It does not mean normal hygienic elimination of your bladder sometime previous during the day, does it?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, did you review an email to one of the detectives on the case, Detective Katz, in your report stated March 7, 2003, where there was still a discussion as to determination whether or not Mr. Spector had voided properly?
That calls for hearsay. It's not the proper subject of an expert.
Let me have the question right back, please.
In fact, did you review an email to one of the detectives on the case, Detective Katz, in your report dated March 7, 2003, where there was a discussion as to the determination whether or not Mr. Spector had voided properly?
Do you have can I review whatever this is?
Yes.
Somebody, do you have it with you, Doctor?
I don't believe so.
Let me see it, please. I need to ask a question. Did you rely on that in forming any opinions on this case as to the propriety of any urine samples or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I'm going to allow him to testify, and I will limit it to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the following information is not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but is offered as to a basis for this witness's conclusions and opinions. All right, with that in mind, you may proceed.
Thank you. Can you answer the question? Do you remember what it is, Dr. Middleburg?
May I see the document, please?
Yes.
Just to refresh my memory. Yes, I do recognize this.
Okay. Can you answer the question, or do you need me to sort of rephrase it or read it back to you?
There's an indication here that there was no initial void prior to collection.
Okay. And did you also review on that same document a discussion of whether or not the urine sample of Mr. Spector had been preserved properly to do a scientific urine test?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Same rule, and ladies and gentlemen, again, this is not for the truth of the matter asserted, but as to the extent that it is used by this witness to form an opinion or conclusion, it's admissible on that basis only.
It is indicated that it was not preserved.
Okay. And finally, Doctor, along the last lines that Mr. Jackson asked you, by the by the smell on somebody's breath, can you tell whether they are intoxicated?
No. No,
hell yeah,
Why
ask any
pharmacologically
mother,
can you not do that?
any grandmother who's coming in the door. Let me smell your breath.
What people generally smell on an individual's breath, when you hear that they say they smelled alcohol on a person's breath, is not alcohol at all. Maybe a chemist can smell alcohol, but very few lay people would be able to smell alcohol. What they smell is an alcoholic beverage. But just as an example, if you were to drink near beer, which is beer without alcohol in it, your breath would still smell like beer. So trying to determine whether somebody's impaired just by the smell of a beverage on their breath is really a very bad idea.
When somebody has diabetes, in terms of looking at something pharmacologically, does that affect what you look at in terms of even if there's a smell of alcohol?
It can.
Why?
Diabetes can form what's known as ketone bodies, and ketone bodies will impart a fruity odor to an individual's breath.
Okay. And finally, Doctor, with regard to the urinalysis that you looked at and that .07, was that .07 micrograms? I'm getting my nanograms and my micrograms and my milligrams confused.
0.07%.
Okay. Was there any scientific reliability that you could place in that sample in order to give it any importance?
Man.
There's no
I've heard stuff like that before.
independent scientific evidence to rely on that sample.
Thank you, Doctor. No further questions.
Thank you. First of all, if I guess I'm just confused. If you didn't know what that email was, how'd you know to answer the judge that you relied on it?
I wasn't sure exactly what the wording was. I wanted to see what the wording was. But I definitely remember seeing this, as well as a few others.
But you didn't know when you answered the judge. You hadn't seen it yet.
Objection. It's not mistake what you just said.
I just wasn't sure which one it was.
I
think he answered.
Okay. You said you can't make a determination as to the level of intoxication of a person just by smelling their breath. I mean, correct?
Yes, sir.
Pretty commonsensical. Nobody's suggesting otherwise in this, at least in any of the reports that you've read, correct?
No.
But what you can tell by someone smelling the odor of alcohol or an alcoholic beverage on someone else's breath is that they've consumed alcohol, correct?
Again, what you can tell is they've consumed a beverage. Again, there are beverages without alcohol in them. There's wine without
I
alcohol.
see what he's
There's
saying.
beer
You
without
literally can't
alcohol.
smell alcohol. We know, right? Because of the beverage that we smell.
That's all I have.
Okay, we do
Right?
it.
I don't know. That one's weird.
Somebody has diabetes because of the ketone issue, isn't it?
It can.
Thank you.
I heard it was if you're diabetic.
Thank you.
All right, subject to recall your excuse. Thank you for being here. You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess unless you have a 3-minute witness.
See where the next one's going to start us off. Next Murder Church
I
with
only
Phil
asked. It's
Spector.
not what I believed.
Have a great morning.
Keep in mind
Into
the
the
admonition. We'll
afternoon.
see you tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you.
Don't forget, I am not done for the day. I'll be back shortly with Mo in the deep end. But next, starting off, we'll be starting with another hour. A new person, blood splatter expert James Pex, takes the stand. That's where we'll be heading next with Phil Spector. What a crazy trial, man. Thanks everyone for coming in this morning. We had an awesome morning. Everyone coming through, I really appreciate it. Now, do not forget, like I said, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm coming through again with another stream. This stream is going to be with Mo in the deep end. If you've not seen her on it before, you're going to enjoy her. Really does a lot of reaction type stuff. Does lots of stuff, actually, but I really enjoy her reaction stuff. We did some of the Sarah Boone stuff, but this episode is going to be on the Butcher of Tompkins Square Park, Daniel Rakowitz. A cannibal story that is going to be interrogated for your and our viewing pleasure, as we're going to be watching, and I bet it's going to be dark. I bet it goes down of course, it's going to go down an incredibly dark path. The story is nuts. We're going to go over it. Come in here. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Sunday, but I hope I do see you back here, and let's see if I can maybe even send you to that stream. Maybe help you out early. I am going to do that, actually. Yeah. You're going to leave this stream and go into my 3 o'clock stream. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all so much. Again, I will see you back shortly. Come back.
Disperse!